Oh, there we are. Hi, welcome to another edition of GalaxyCon Talks Comics. I'm Mike Broder, and with me is my effervescent co-host, Patty Hawkins.
Hello, everybody. How y'all doing today? Shout out to all our friends in the Legion of Superheroes Facebook page. We're all very excited. We had Keith Gibbon here a while ago, so our next guest, of course, will be very prevalent for those interested in Legion history.
We, without further ado, he's one of the giants, figuratively and literally, of the comic book industry. Started at 13 years old with DC, writing stories for the Legion of Superheroes, writer of Secret Wars, big run on the Avengers, Marvel's editor-in-chief during the height in the 80s, founder, editor of Valiant Comics, founder, editor, Defiant Comics, Broadway Comics. I mean, his resume is gigantic. Here he is, Mr. Jim Shooter.
Hi.
Hi, Jim.
Hey.
I apologize for looking so scruffy. I just got out of the hospital and I couldn't shave in there, you know. So.
Oh God.
You
just got out? You just got out?
Yeah, just yesterday evening.
Oh God.
Wow. Okay. Well, we're glad to see you out and home. And
I'm okay now.
Okay, good.
Good. I'm a little scruffy too, so we'll.
Good company.
It's that quarantine life.
Well, yeah.
We've so in all your years, I mean, do you ever think you'd live to see anything like this?
I've never done this before, and this is really interesting. I like it.
Patty, where do you want to start?
If it's okay with Jim, I think let's go ahead and go back to the beginning. You're a teenager, and to help support your family, you wrote comics. Let's go back into those days, if that's okay.
Oh, sure. Well, the thing is, I stopped reading comics when I was 8 years old. That would have been around 1959, and because they were boring, and the only things really around were Superman and Batman. This newfangled Flash thing came along, which was, that was a little fun. But I lost interest. And then I was, again, in the hospital when I was 12 years old, and they had a kids ward in a hospital in those days. They had 4 kids on a ward, and there were tons of comics because in those days they were everywhere, and they were very popular. And, so I had a week to kill. And so I started reading some of these, and the DC comics were all pristine, like nobody opened them. The Marvel comics were all these newfangled Marvel comics were all dog-eared and ratty, because everybody read them. And so I read them, and I thought, hey, these are pretty good, and they're not like the other ones. And I started trying to think, like, well, why do I like these better? What's wrong with these, and what's and I was 12 years old. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to try to do this. And so I spent literally a year studying. I don't read the comics. I love the comics, but I was really trying to analyze, And then when I was 13, I wrote my first 3 stories and sent them in. I sent the first one in, and I got a letter back saying, send us another one, right? I sent them 2 more. And then I get a call from the editor at DC, Mort Weisinger. He said he wanted to buy those 3. See, I lived in Pittsburgh, it's 400 miles away from New York. And he said he wanted to buy those 3, and he wanted to start using me as a regular writer. And my first assignment was a Supergirl story. And the way the assignment went was Supergirl, 12 pages, next Friday. I said, yes, sir. So I started, writing regularly. And the Legion of Superheroes became my regular book. In 5 years, I did all but 4 issues. The only reason I didn't do those 4 issues is because the editor wanted to do them himself. Okay, So, but I also did Superman. I did all of the Superman family titles: Jimmy Olsen, Superboy, Supergirl, World's Finest, and I even did Captain Action. I created Captain Action, so I worked my way through high school, And,
what was that first story that you sent in on spec?
Right.
What was the character?
it was the Legion of Superheroes. It was the origin of Sunboy. It was Dr. Regulus or something. And it was, funny thing is, like I said, I sent them three stories. And there was the first one I sent was like this origin of Sunboy thing. And the second two were it was a 2-part story, 2-issue story. And so, yeah. But the funny thing is that was the first one they published. They published them out of order.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the first one that I wrote was the third one published. So that was 346 maybe. And the first one I wrote came out as 348. But in those days at DC, there's no continuity. So it didn't matter. You published in any order. It didn't matter.
And
you could read 100 Superman stories in any order. It wouldn't make any difference. You know?
And one of the things that you did right away is that you, again, with these new characters you introduced, is that you created more close quarter Legionnaires. Because at that point, everybody just sort of had a hold imposed distance power. Yeah,
they point their fingers and stuff happens. And I thought, I need somebody, who can break through a wall or do something physical. So, I thought, well, what's physical? And I thought, martial arts, hey, karate,
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted this character, Pharaoh Lad, who was metallic and strong, and I guess sort of like Colossus, later. And Princess Projectra, she created illusions, which at least is visual.
Yeah.
And the other one's the bad guy, Nemesis Kid.
Mm-hmm.
He's the traitor.
And Keith Giffen has been trying to kill off Karate Kid ever since.
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, what's wrong with it? But who cares?
DC keeps bringing them back, so there you go.
Yeah. But, the thing is, like I said, there was no continuity, right?
Yeah.
At DC. And I asked the editor about continuity. He said, we don't do that. And I said, oh, okay. But then I realized, since I did the Legion every month, I owned the future. That was the only book set in the future. So I could do my continuity and not interfere with anybody. And so I started doing continuity in the Legion of Superheroes. And it worked out pretty well. DC sales were plummeting in the 60s. Marvels were rising. In the very first issue of mine they published, there was one of those postal statements of ownership. And the sales of Legion were about 500,000 copies an issue. In the last issue I did, the sales were about 500,000 copies an issue, while everything else was falling.
Great.
I held my own, so I felt pretty good.
Who was the editor on the book?
Mort Weisinger. Mort Weisinger was they didn't call him editor-in-chief, but he was like the head editor at DC.
Who wrote you that first letter that you got back? Was that from Mort, or was that from somebody else in the office?
No, it was from Mort.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you had a very unique relationship with Mort, didn't you?
Well, when he thought I was a college student,
Yeah.
I mean, he thought I was like 19, 20 or something like that. And I was, I was 13 when I started. And so then he started calling me at a regularly scheduled phone call every Thursday night, right after the Batman TV show. Okay. And so he would call me, and we would go over whatever I'd sent him that week. And he also called me whenever else he needed to call me. But so one of the first times he called me, he said, "Look, I'm going to fly you up to New York. We're going to put you up in a hotel. We'll pay for everything. We just want to teach you some stuff." And I said, and he's, "How old are you?" And I said, "Well, I just turned 14." He said, "Put your mother on the phone." She was on board. It didn't bother her. So I got back on the phone with him. He says, "All right," he says, "this is going to be a regular writer, and I don't care if you're 14. He says, "I'm going to treat you just like I treat everybody else." And I said, "Oh, okay." What that meant was that he was going to scream at me all the time and use obscenities and stuff. Anyway, but he taught me a lot. I mean, credit where credit is due. He taught me so much.
He was grooming you to be as an apprentice.
Well, yeah, I mean, like years later, he's screaming all the time, "You moron, why can't you spell? What's this supposed to be?" And then what I found out was years later, after Mort was retired, and I was talking to his assistant at the time, who was E. Nelson Bridwell, Nelson said he used to take my stuff around and show the other editors and brag about his discovery. You know, I said, "What, the moron?" You know, and he also, when I would go up to the office, which I started to do regularly, he'd sit me down and talk to me about marketing and licensing and finance and stuff. And I'm thinking, why do I need to know this? You know, but you didn't question anything with Mort. You know, didn't dare ask a question. And then he sat me down with Jack Adler to learn about in-house production and printing production, and George Klein and Tadano Wood, and just to learn about the whole business and the business of the business. And I still wondered what's going on here, you know. And Nelson told me he was grooming me to have a job like his, you know. So, you know, it didn't work out that I ended up at DC, but all that stuff came in real handy when I started at Marvel.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's interesting because you're probably one of the few guys who actually had that kind of an education leading into an editor-in-chief role.
Yep.
Most of these guys don't, you know.
No, I think that I'm unique in that regard. I mean, Paul Levitz, you know, I mean, he's, you know, he's brilliant, and he's, you know, I think he's an MBA, and he's financially savvy and all that stuff, and so we're like two of the people who have business experience and also did creative, you know.
Yeah.
And the only difference between me and Paul is that I started companies and he didn't.
That's ironic. You're both well known for work on the Legion.
Yeah, he did a good job. Yeah. He did a really good job.
That's true. It's a testament to both of you because, again, you know, guys like me, I mean, sure, we know canon and apocrypha and all this nonsense, but we couldn't tell you how exactly the staples work and the layouts and stuff, which was this was the logistics and stuff like that, which comes very much into play in an editor's job. That so much of us as fans, you know, we don't get no prizes for pointing out that sort of nonsense. So
I had to learn all that stuff.
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you what, it was when I started. First I started at Marvel, it was just the editor. They called me associate editor, but I was the editor. Mm-hmm. And then when I became editor-in-chief 2 years later, you know, now I'm on the phone with the printer and stuff. It's real handy to use the right words, you know, and to be able to speak intelligently about the printing and the production department, use the right words. And, you know, all that stuff came back, and it was very helpful.
When you were working with Mort, did he ever talk to you about the stuff that he had done with the pulps in the 20s and 30s?
No, not so much. He told me about, you know, him and Julie founding the Scienceers, but the thing is, he had a book coming out at that time called The Contest. It was about the Miss America pageant. See, Mort was very wealthy, but the way he made most of I mean, DC paid him pretty well, I guess. But the way he made most of his money is he wrote magazine articles, okay? And what he would do is he would research some topic, and then he would write articles based on that topic. And in those days, you know, it would be published in one magazine, and another magazine would want it, and then so he'd sell it again and again and again. And like, for instance, he became like the world's leading authority on the Miss America pageant. He wrote a lot of articles about it and made a lot of money from that. Also, his wife Thelma, she had multiple sclerosis, and so, you know, that drove him crazy, and so he became the world's leading lay authority on MS, and then, you know, and she went into remission. As long as I was around, she was in remission, and I don't know, I guess stayed that way, but so then he used all this knowledge to write, you know, articles about MS, and you know, so that was his MO. I mean, he had this fabulous mansion in Great Neck, and you know, he worked hard.
So did you. Under his
stuff. You go to school all day, and then you come home and you work all evening. You know.
At what point did the initial excitement sort of fade, and then it became work?
Well, it never, the excitement never faded. I always loved it. I always loved it. But there is a certain element of grinding it out. You have to sit there and do it. I used to sit at one end of the couch and actually wore out the armrest. And it was because I'm sitting there with my elbow on the armrest doing my stuff, and it just it was a lot of work, and it wasn't easy. And I also, at the same time, I'm in high school, and I knew if I didn't get an academic scholarship, since I couldn't play football that well, I wasn't going to college.
Did your classmates know that you were doing this? Were you the kid that, hell yeah, Jimmy Shooter, he writes comic books? Or was this...
Nobody thought it was a big deal. It was like instead of working as a dry cleaner at this other job, there weren't that many, especially for DC Comics. I don't think there were that many older high school kids and college kids, who read comics, and most of them just didn't care about it. And I didn't care that they didn't care. I was having a ball, when I was doing this stuff. And I got to fly up to New York, and they put me up in a hotel. Now these days, if a 14 or 15-year-old kid went to the airport by himself, got on an airplane, flew to New York, checked into a hotel, they'd arrest the parents. But in those days, nobody thought anything of it. The airline didn't think anything of it. The hotel didn't think anything of it. The people in the office didn't think anything of it.
Did they give you a tag? Or is that like a 70s thing? Because sometimes when kids were traveling alone at the airplane, they would literally tag them. They had a big tag.
No. And sometimes sometimes they paid for it. And then sometimes I had to pay for it myself. I'll tell you why in a minute. So when I did that, I was flying student standby. Okay. And just to give you an idea of how old I am, the round trip ticket to New York, student standby, was $25. How about that? And then I, drove home in my Model T.
So you went through your little apprenticeship with DC, and then you went to college, and then you thought,
Patty, before we get there, why'd you have to pay to fly up on your own?
Well, the reason I had to pay to fly up on my own is because at DC Comics, you did not dare be late with something. You did not dare, because that was a kiss of death. If you didn't deliver, it's over. And so sometimes, I'm going to school and working, trying to get stuff done, and sometimes it would go down to the wire. And the only way I could get that script in on the day it was due was to get on a plane and take it myself. And the bus fare from Newark Airport to New York City was 55 cents. I thought that was outrageous. But anyway, one way or another. And I ended up having to do that more often than I should. But like I said, I'm going to school, and every once in a while I try to be a kid.
Wow.
So speaking of kids, he's not a kid anymore. I just got a text from George's Genti.
Oh, yeah.
And he told me George is a very, very good friend of mine. And I know from before he ever even worked with you, but he just wanted to say hi to you.
Oh, good. I think we gave him his first job in comics.
Yes. Dogs of War.
Yes.
And I'm going to lead somewhere with that. But George's is a very, very close friend. I knew him when he was working in a comic store down in Miami when he did Dogs of War. Yeah. And he was working for BAM in Miami, and he has become, he is incredible artist now.
Oh, yes. He was a little raw when he started out. He was still good,
Yes.
But he learned quickly, and he's gotten dangerous.
Yes. And which brings me to this one. You discovered and mentored a lot of young talent over the years in Marvel, and then again at Valiant, and again at Defiant, and at Broadway. And some people that have gone on to be big, huge names. I think you probably discovered more people than, anyone else.
Yeah, well, when I was in Marvel, I mean, of course, I'm looking for guys, and we looked at samples. I was very, I got my first job sending in a sample over the transom, right? And so I had great respect for people who uh, put their stuff in a manila envelope and sent it off.
Yeah.
And then I really got incredibly lucky because, I needed help. And I got Archie Goodwin, who was editor-in-chief before me, and got him to come back and run the Epic line. And I got Larry Hama, Louise Simonson, and then eventually I had Al Milgram, and eventually Carl Potts and Bob Budiansky. I had some great guys, and they were all good at finding artists. Larry Hama found a lot of good people. I mean, Carl Potts used to handle more samples than anybody. And, so I had a whole army of people who knew what they were looking at, so we were good at that. We were pretty good at that. And so we started off with a lot of people, Bill Sienkiewicz, for instance,
And the main thing is that you guys were able to discern who could do really good pinup art and then who could have the chops to do sequential art.
Yeah, that's true. Some guys were just cover artists,
Yeah.
And some guys could do the continuity, and I mean, if a guy was great but he didn't do good, storytelling, but he could do great covers. Okay, he's going for covers.
Sure.
Anyway.
Or you put them on strips that are, a little less high profile, get a little bit under their belt before they start.
Yeah, and then they learn. Yeah, because if you work for Larry Hama, you learn, or else.
Definitely. And again, there was so much more going on than just the regular line. Yeah, you said the Epic line was going on under your stewardship. A lot of experimental stuff that was just, let's throw it against the wall. I mean, I think Star Comics was a noble experiment. Call me crazy, but I think, why not?
No, and it did well for a while. Care Bears, for instance, sold really well. And it was also the #1 comic book in England,
Really?
by a long shot. It was the most popular comic in England. And we had a lot of good stuff. Masters of the Universe did well. The Thundercats did well. But there was a few that maybe didn't work out quite so well.
But again,
Spider-Ham is one of the biggest things in the world right now.
Yeah, and that was I guess it was Tom DeFalco and Larry cooked that up. I think Larry was the main driving force behind it. Yeah, and it was silly as hell. And a little kid would read it, and it was like a cartoon book. But when we read it, we saw the little in jokes and stuff, and it was even better.
I was a big fan of the artist Steve. Was it Moliere? Was how you pronounce his last name? I could never quite figure it out. But he did those crazy strips for Larry and the tail end of Crazy, the Kinetic Kids and all that wackiness. Which
I can't remember his name either. That's a long time.
So, what was the first convention that you remember going to?
Well, I didn't know there were conventions. And so I think somebody from the Pittsburgh Comics Club tracked me down somehow, and I got to know those guys a little bit, and they said, hey, why don't you come with us to the convention? I said, what convention? What's a convention? What are you talking about? And what they were talking about was the Phil Seuling's JulyCon, okay, and on the 4th of July weekend. And so I drove up to New York. I don't know how they got there, but I drove, and so I go to this convention. I'm looking around like I couldn't believe it. I mean, the first thing I see is Joe Sinnott surrounded by a group of people. He's got some guy's drawing pad book, and he's just freehanding in ink a picture of the thing.
Oh wow!
And I'm tall enough to see over the crowd. And that's Joe Sinnott, and and it was really funny. I think the first time I was on stage, I never met Gil Kane. I'd worked with him at DC, but he was never in the office when I was, you know. And so one of the guys says, "Hey, you want to?" He says, "Want to come to this? He's doing an interview, you know." And in fact, there was a guy from the Pittsburgh Comics Club who was conducting the interview. So it was, you know, just him and Gil on stage. His name was Mark Lehrer. He later actually did some work for Marvel. So anyway, the room is packed. There's like 500 people. And so we went. I'm standing in the back, you know, because there's no place to sit. And so Mark, he asked him, he said, "What do you think of these new artists, you know, Kaluta and Starlin?" And he says, "They're not picture makers." Nah, they're no good. And then Mark Lehrer says, "Who's your favorite writer to work with?" He says, "Writers are idiots." So anyway, he says, "Surely there must be somebody you enjoyed working with." And he said, "Well, there's this one young man from Pittsburgh, right?" And Mark says, "Are you aware he's in the room?" He said, "Well, no, I never met him, you know." And so they called me up on stage. And and I shook hands with Gil Kane. And 500 people went wild.
Wow.
So it was really cool.
It's cool.
That's great. I assume Gil was dressed to the nines as he was.
Oh yeah, Gil was very, you know, very fancy.
Very
guy.
dapper, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and the thing is, as cranky as he was, you know, as curmudgeonly as he was a great guy. He was,
Sure.
you know, and the reason he thought I was a good writer is because I did layouts for him. I made his work easier, you know, and so that gave me a little boost there, you know. Other than that, I'd probably just be an idiot writer. But I would design the covers and actually color them so they'd get a real clear idea of what I had in mind. And I would lay out every panel, do a little layout for every panel. And so I guess that made his life a little easier. And the artists liked that. All of them liked it. And also, here I was, I'm this 14, 15, 16-year-old kid, and I'm doing these layouts for Hall of Famers, you know, Gil Kane, Wally Wood, you know, Kurt Swan, you know, and they respected my layouts. You know, sometimes they'd help me, you know, and say, "Oh, you know, this should be over here," you know, and you know, I mean, I talked to Kurt Swan sometimes, and he used to write me these letters. You know, he was the nicest gentleman in the world, and he would give me little tips and stuff. You know, it was a kind of a magical time.
So, as a writer, and throughout your entire career as a writer, who are some of the artists that you most enjoyed working with?
Well, Wally Wood, Gil Kane, Kurt Swan. I liked working with Al Plastino. You know, and I did who else? I'd have to think. But you know, I've worked with some great guys at Marvel. John Buscema, you know. Who else? I never really got to work with Frank Miller. You know, I gave him his first job, but you know, he got gobbled up by other writers, and you know. And I was real busy being editor-in-chief. I didn't have that much time.
Yeah, you were. And another thing too that a lot of people don't realize, and when you were regularly publishing your blog, which I always recommend people go check out, is that a lot of people don't understand that you were the coach trying to keep control of the bench and keep things running. Meanwhile, but you were the guy that also had to go upstairs and talk to the guys in charge who didn't read comics. And so are we going to do something with Batman or what? You know, and you'd have to say, "We don't publish Batman. We don't." Oh.
No, that's an actual story. The international licensing woman, Gail Munn, she called me up all excited. She said, "I just made the greatest deal for Wonder Woman." I said, "Gail, we don't own Wonder Woman." You know, she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "It's a DC character." And she said, what? You know, I said, "Look, call." I can't remember the licensing lady at DC. what they call that? I don't know. Whatever the licensing division over there. I can't remember her name, but I said, call her up and tell her you teed up a deal for her, and make it seem like you did her a favor,
There you go.
Yeah, and then but she was just insane because she couldn't believe we didn't own Wonder Woman. She said, well, why did they call me? And I said, because we're Marvel Comics. We are 70% of the market. People think we're comics. That's it. And so we get that a lot. Why are you doing this to Superman? We don't have any control of that. But anyway.
But maybe she saw a random copy of the second Spider-Man Superman crossover, which you had a little something to do with that one.
Yes. Yeah. I don't think she ever actually looked at a. As a matter of fact, that's why I got to go, and on all these trips to like toy companies and Frankfurt Book Fair and stuff like that, is because they quickly discovered that I was presentable, not like this. I was presentable, and that I was the only one who could talk intelligently about the comics. And so so instead of sitting there and blinking their big cow eyes when the German publisher was asking them what we were going to do with the X-Men, X who? When I was there, I'd say, well, this is what we're going to do, and da-da-da-da. And so I helped them sell, and so and it's, same with G.I. Joe and Hasbro. I started it. Larry took the ball and ran with it, but I was the one who went to the first meeting, and I was the one who helped make the deal.
And you had to corner Larry down to get him to write it because nobody wanted to do licensing work at the time. Because correct me if I'm wrong, licensing had gotten a bad reputation for having to deal with a licensor.
Well, that was later. I mean, G.I. Joe was like our first big effort in that direction. And Larry, ex-military, explosive ordnance expert, and he was working on something similar. It was called the Fury Force, and it was going to be like a revival of Sergeant Fury, except there'd be anti-terrorists,
Yeah.
And so he told me about it, and so I went to him and I said, hey, look, we got this thing going with Hasbro, And I said, you want to do this? And he was thrilled to do it. He was right in the wheelhouse, And he said, well, can I use some of the ideas for this Fury Force for this? I said, yeah, go. That's fine, go for it. Because my contributions were, in the first meeting with Hasbro, they didn't know what they were going to do. They had a slideshow. And the slideshow had the logo, G.I. Joe, a real American hero, and had a photo of a soldier. That's all they had. They didn't even know what size figures they were going to make. And I said, you got to do the Star Wars size.
Yeah.
That's the most popular. It's 3 3/4, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, 3 quarters. Yeah,
3 quarters.
I said, because I was a little boy once, and if you had the figures that were the same size, they'd have their G.I. Joe guys fighting the Star Wars guys. Boys. I'm a boy. I actually understood this stuff, and then they said, well, what are we going to do? G.I. Fred, G.I. Steve. We want a whole line of comics of characters. And I said, no. G.I. Joe is the name of the unit. And it has to be anti-terrorism. And so when there's a terrorist crisis, you call in G.I. Joe. Yeah. So they like that, and they like the anti-terrorism thing, and they like I talked them into the Star Wars size, and so they said, can you give us? We want to do toys, animation, comics. We want to license. Can you give us a storyline? And I said, yeah, we can handle it. We'll give it to you in a few days. And that's when I went to Larry, and he said, wow, that's great, I'll do it. So he did it, and I think I asked Denny O'Neil to sort of be the editor, and Denny wasn't interested. So it was just Larry. And he just nobody bothered him. I certainly wasn't going to bother him. He knew what he was doing. And if you did try to lecture him, he'd get cranky. But that was great. And then Transformers, I wrote the foundation story.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, and then Bob Budiansky took it from there. He created all the characters, and Bumblebee, and Sky's Scream or something. All this. He did it all, and just he did it brilliantly. He did a great job. Then we did some stuff that nobody really wanted to do. Nobody wanted to do sectars, nobody wanted to do what was Inhumanoids,
Yeah.
But there was a lot of things that that just you could see it was a failure out of the gate.
Was ROM and Micronauts before you took over, or was that during your tenure?
That was during my tenure.
Okay.
When I was there in the first, few months, I guess, of being editor-in-chief, I get this call from this guy, Stan Weston, and he worked for, he was doing licensing for a company called Mego.
Mike likes sectars.
Huh?
Mike likes sectars.
There you go. They're good toys. I like the toys.
These were the coolest toys.
Yeah. The toys were good, but there was too many limitations on us. And anyway, but I'm sitting there at my little editor-in-chief desk, and this Stan Weston guy calls up, and he said he had this thing called Micronauts, would be interested in licensing. And I said, well, I don't know, what is it, And so he sent me a box of toys. And so I had all these toys on my desk, and they really look pretty cool. They really look pretty cool. I thought, I don't know, maybe, And then Bill Mantlo walks into my office, and he says, I got this toys for my kids, and they're great, and we should license them. I said, what's it called? He said, Micronauts. I said, well, look, Bill, look what's on my desk, And so he was thrilled to do it, and he did it. I think it was one of the best things he ever did.
I agree. Those first 12 issues, him and Mike Golden, absolutely.
Yeah, doesn't hurt to have Michael Golden with you.
Yeah, that's true.
And then ROM, I don't know how the president of the company calls me up to his office, and I don't know how he got involved with this. I guess somehow he met somebody who introduced him to this thing, and he had this ROM robot. He said, "What do you think of this?" I don't know. Okay. And he says, "Look, lights flash and it makes a noise." Okay. He said, "I think we should do a comic book." I thought, well, you, the comic book expert, are telling me. Yeah. Okay. I said, all right, well, and he says, why don't we go up to Parker Brothers and make a deal? I said, all right. So the two of us took the shuttle up to Boston and rented a car and drove out to Parker Brothers, which was in a really great wooded, setting and a beautiful, lot and nice building. And we met with them, and the Golden he had already decided. Yeah. I don't know why. Why he thought that was so thrilling, but so I once again I wrote sort of the foundation, and then turned it over to Bill because he liked it. He wanted to do it, and he really, I gave him bare bones, and he took it from there. I mean, he has a character in there. I think his name is Brandy. That's a Bill name. That wasn't mine.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's fine. It's a fine name. It's nothing I would can think of. So he did a lot of them, but he put a lot of flesh on the bone.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing he did that was really good. And we got Steve Ditko to draw it. I loved it. And everybody wanted to ink Steve, so we had all these great inkers, lined up to ink the next Steve Ditko book.
Yeah.
So from the business point of view, on the licensing, it's really, that's the second generation of licensed books, because with, Star Wars, Conan, Planet of the Apes, Star Trek, and Godzilla in the late 70s, and then you go into the G.I. Joe, Micronauts, Transformers, Thundercats.
Well, Conan was already there. The other ones I think came during my tenure, whether I liked it or not. In some cases, we had Godzilla. We had
Shogun Warriors.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and some of that was kind of forced on me. But I'll tell you what, that was some of the best stuff that Doug Minch ever did.
And I think some of my favorite. I think Herb really knocked it out of the park too for a license.
Yeah, Herb. I thought he was great.
He was great on those titles.
Yeah, yeah. Those were interesting times. You know, I mean, the thing is, it's not everything worked. You know, I'm not saying there weren't some things that were, not great. I mean, but there was a lot of it that was really good.
Were they
And it took off.
lucrative?
Hmm?
Were the licensed books lucrative? Because you don't own the IP.
Right.
You only have them for a certain amount of the license period. So were they lucrative during the period to be doing that?
Well, it depends on the property, but I mean, like Star Wars, kept Marvel in business when it otherwise would have died, all by itself. And Transformers sold like crazy. Conan actually did really, really well, and especially the black and white Conan, because according to the costs versus the profit, it was actually our most profitable book for a while. You know, it's a black and white book.
Yeah.
You know, cheap to print.
Yeah.
And so it sold really, really well, and so it actually was a very profitable book for us. And the thing is that was great, because then I had more money to play with, and I could see. They left me alone, because none of those people upstairs had ever opened a comic book, and they didn't. And as long as things were going well, they didn't bother me, except occasionally they'd say, "Oh, we really need to do ROM." All right. But that worked out okay.
Yeah.
I mean, ROM, the comic book, way outlasted ROM the toy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, like, but like I had a pretty free hand when I took that job. Jim Galton told me, "You're here to preside over the death of Marvel Comics." Almost those words, and because he thought comics were just a total loser, because they were losing money when I came in, right? Not a lot, but they were losing money, and I said, "You're so wrong." I said, we're gonna be bigger than Disney, and he said, "Oh, baloney," And I said, you wait. I said, we're a long way from there, but we can start. And man, we were on our way. We were doing pretty good, and the thing is, because I had a pretty free hand, I was able to get these great artists and writers. I got David Michelinie from DC. I got all these great new artists, Bill Sienkiewicz, and after that, guys like Paul Smith, and of course, we already had John Romita Jr. was one of the greatest, great storyteller, good art. Anyway, I doubled the rates. I doubled them again. I kept increasing them as I could. I was known as the hardball negotiator. John Romita Jr. come in, and he when his contract expired, he wanted to negotiate a new one, and he wanted a $3 raise. I said, "Well, I was going to give you 10, but I mean, it was not only a page. They couldn't change work for hire. They wouldn't let me do that. But I increased the page rate. I established a continuity bonus. You do some of the issues in a row, get a bonus, right? And then later the royalties, and we provided to freelancers. We provided health care, we provided life insurance, really good health care, and life insurance, and paid for all their supplies. Ink, pens, whatever. Try to buy a Winsor Newton brush. You would have a couple $100 for you.
Mm-hmm.
It was really good for a while.
Now, you said you couldn't change work for hire, but you did.
Oh, sort of. I mean, I did. We established the Epic line, where the creator owned the stuff. I said I can't do it with Spider-Man, but we could anything new, if we publish it through the Epic line, But that was funny because I got we conned Archie into coming back, and he was going to do the creator owned, and at that time the creator owned consisted of Epic Illustrated Magazine, which he just did a great job, and then it just looked great. The covers were great. Everything was he's one of the best ever, maybe the best ever, and he was working for me, and then what happened was Starlin And Walt Simonson and Frank Miller came to me, and they said, we want to create our own comic books. I said, okay. I said, what do you mean, okay? I said, you can just decide that? I said, yes. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, oh, let's go see the publisher. We walk into Mike Hobson's office, and I said, these guys want to do create our own comic books. He said, what are you bothering me for? So anyway, as it turned out, instead of doing a series, Walt ended up doing Star Slammers as a graphic novel. Okay. At that time, Jeanette Kahn was like just all over Frank Miller. I mean, she was courting him, Yeah. And so he ended up going over there to do Ronin. And so the only guy that out of those first three that did a create our own comic book series was Starlin. That started really well. But the funny thing is, here's the funny part of the story is so I walk into Archie's office once I get Starlin, these three guys I think are going to do this stuff. I walk in, it's Arch, great idea, Epic Comics, and he lost his mind at me. He said, well, I'm overworked already. I can't. What are you trying to do to me? Trying to kill me? And, it's like 140 pounds of twisted steel, man, and backed off, And so I thought, what am I going to do? So Starlin was big buddies with Al Milgrom. So I went and I asked Al, I said, you'd be interested in doing this? He said, oh, yeah. So anyway, next morning, Archie comes in. He kind of storms into my office. He's screaming at me. How dare you give away Epic Comics? Epic is mine. I'm like, make up your mind, pal. So anyway, tell Al, I'm going to give this to Archie. And he's like, well, wait, you can't take this from me. I said, yes, I can. And I'm going to give it to Archie, because he's the Epic guy. And so if you notice on the first issue of Dreadstar, Milgrom has a co-editor credit, a little appeasement.
Was Marvel Fanfare the consolation prize?
No, that was I think that was Al's idea.
Okay.
I thought it was a good idea.
I loved it. It was a great anthology book. It could be anything at any point.
Yeah, and because several reasons. Because it was a series. It was a bunch of one shots by different artists, and sometimes there were more than one in the same book. So doing a royalty on that would have been higher math. So what we did instead is we just paid. I don't know, was maybe double the rate, something like that. We gave him an extra rate, and so we got really good guys. We had Michael Golden and I don't know who else. Well, we had good guys.
Ken Stacy on that awesome Iron Man story he did. That's one of my all-time favorite Iron Man and Dr. Octopus stories.
Yes.
At Vest doing that Warriors 3 story. I mean, there was just those first 36 issues is absolutely. If I had to pick one book to encapsulate your tenure at Marvel and Marvel the 80s, I would say Marvel Fanfare. Because it
wouldn't be a bad choice. It wouldn't be a bad choice. And Al did a great job with it. I mean, he was really into it, and he was also, everybody liked him, and he was really good at working with artists, and got some great guys, and we did some fun stuff, and
Secret Wars 2.
Well, with Leia Aloha.
Yeah.
Leia Aloha inking him.
Yeah.
And it was he did a good job. I mean, Al's style is a little cartoony. I didn't care.
But he was
the story like crazy.
Exactly.
Leia Aloha, made it look great.
But Al was a utility guy. I mean, he was. You knew, like, you could go to Al and he could just do the work. You knew you were going to get it. You weren't going to have any headaches, right?
Right.
Because at that point in time, I was a big Avengers fan.
Oh yeah.
And Al was doing a lot of work on that book. It was Bob Hall and Al Milgrom were kind of jumping around on that book.
Yeah, Bob Hall did a lot of them.
And then Al wasn't. I don't know that Al was particularly one of the fan favorites, but he always seemed like a guy who could get the work done when it needed to get done.
Well, fan favorite or not, that stuff sold like crazy. I mean, it was I think that he tells the story really well. Maybe his style isn't as flashy as Jim Lee, but he tells the story really well. He draws well, and he did a good job. I mean, he was editor for a while. He got tired of that. He wanted to be a freelancer, especially because he can make more money getting royalties, than he could as an editor. Although I tried to pay those editors the best I could. I mean, I wrote the budget every year, okay, and so what the situation was, if I could, save money on the costs, which I did, and if I beat the sales projections, and I had money to play with, and so what I do, I'd give Larry Hama a big raise, But I went to a convention last year, and Larry was there, and we were after the show. We were waiting for somebody else. I can't remember, but we sat in the bar for a minute, and we were just talking about the old days. And he said, I couldn't wait to get to work every day. I said, I know exactly how you feel. But it was a good time. It was a really good time, and we were great guys. And Milgram went off, and he did artwork, and he did fine. And
well, West Coast Avengers sold well, right?
Yes.
With him?
Yes. And when Al left, we got Carl Potts. That's not a bad deal, I mean, Carl, he was relatively new when he came in, but he learned like crazy. And also, I didn't even know this, but Larry Hama kind of took him under his wing, and it did a lot of like explaining and teaching. And Carl, he was as sharp as a tack, man. He picked it up, and then he became a teacher himself, and he worked with more young talent. He looked at more art samples than anybody, And
I'm a big Alien Legion fan, so yeah. And I've still got my fingers crossed that he's going to be able to get to see that on as a movie property. He's been shopping for that for a while, and I'm waiting for that. Yeah,
Chris Warner was doing art for that, and he's now an editor or some kind of senior editor or something at Dark Horse.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah. Anyway, those are. Oh, another. Something I want to tell you. I've never gotten to say this in an interview before, but sometimes books they get late, and when I came in there everything was late, and we were supposed to ship 45 color comics in my first month. We shipped 26. Okay, because that's how late everything was. I had books on my desk that should have been on sale 4 months earlier.
Yes.
But they just came in so late. The writers, the artists, they just didn't deliver. They didn't. It wasn't like DC, where you better deliver. So I said, I got to fix this, man. I'll tell you. So we had, actually throughout the 10 years I was there, we would have occasional jobs that kind of went down to the wire, but everything made shipping. Never missed shipping. No book in 10 years missed shipping. Okay. So anyway, but here's guys, and you're asking them to just like stay up all night and finish this thing. Right? And that's not fair, So I invented combat pay. I said, all right, if you have to do something in a hurry, pay a rate and a half. If it's really in a hurry, I'll pay a double rate. And there were times where it had to be. If I had to have several guys up all night, I paid triple rate.
Wow.
And we were making so much money, and I kept finding ways to cut costs. I mean, when I started, the coloring was done on photostats. Remember photostats?
Yeah.
Okay, which came out on this glossy paper, and it was horrible to color on, but it was. And so then we get this newfangled copy machine that changes sizes. So I discovered that I could put a comic book page on the copy machine and shrink it down to
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand by.
approximately. I'll finish it. All right. So anyway, my cost for a photostat was over $1 for each one. Okay, and think about how many pages Marvel did a year, times $1.20 or something.
Yeah.
my cost for a photocopy was 2 cents. Okay, I went home. I had a coloring kit. I went home, tested it out. I thought this works good, and so I told everybody we're going to start coloring, on paper. And at first, the colorists were outraged, and you're ruining everything. The stat guys were losing their minds. We're going to get laid off, I said, no, you're not, And after 2 weeks later, the colorists loved it. Okay, and so anyway, at PS, the stat guys. See, I knew we were sending a lot of stuff out, a lot of films would be duplicated out for the international licensees to bring it in-house. So we saved money there. We saved money on paper, and so I saved a whole big ton of money, which I used to, pay people better. And, and then, like I say, then I could afford combat pay.
Yeah.
Anyway, we did everything we could to make it better, make it good, care about it.
You also fixed the problem of the kids who sent in subscriptions and never got their subscriptions.
Yeah, we had this receptionist. Her name was Josie, but and what would happen is a lot of kids would send in money, bills or quarters taped to the form or something like that. And Kathy Beekman, who later became Kathy Nuzzlees, or maybe it was the other way around. But anyway, she was in charge of subscriptions, and we got so many that she had the receptionist, Josie, opening the things and sorting them and stuff. Well, guess what? When there was money in there, she just took it, and then she'd throw the form away, And so people are complaining to me at conventions when I subscribed it and get any books, And I said, I'll look into it. And then I discovered as I was walking out one day, and this cleaning lady, Anna, was emptying Josie's trash into her big bin, and all these subscription forms falling out of there. So I said, Anna, give me a bag. And I put them all in this bag, right? So the next day I went to show Kathy. I said, this is stealing money. And Kathy said, no, that's impossible. She'd never do that. Right. So I went upstairs to Barry Kaplan, the VP of Finance, and I kind of dumped the stuff out on his desk and told him what was going on. And so, and he overruled Kathy. And they let her, they fired her, but they didn't, nobody went after her. We were mean about it. But then people started actually getting their subscription copies, which was.
But again, that was endemic of what you inherited when you took over.
There was a lot of corruption. I'm telling you, there was a lot of double vouchering and a lot of cheating and a lot of I don't know. People, we would get checks sometimes for things, and this one character who worked for us, he had somehow convinced the Chinese restaurant downstairs that they should cash these Marvel checks for him, and they did. And the checks cleared and everything, So this goes on for a while, right? And then I also, in those days, you had to pay for long distance calls. I had this one guy, and he used to come in late every day. I'm like, well, why is he? I used to talk to him. I said, he can't be coming in here at 11 to 1 o'clock, And then I found out I was going over the phone bills, I found out that he was on the phone to a friend in Georgia all night, every night. And the bill, so everybody else's phone bill is $100 or $100. His was like $2,000.
Jesus.
Yeah, and so I mean, weeding out all the cheaters and theft and corruption and all that stuff, it wasn't easy. But I mean, that also saved money, And actually, the main thing that saved money was getting the books on time, because before, when everything was late, all right, you had to pay late charges at the printer, at the separator, or there were like penalties because they had reserved time and you didn't deliver, And also, the plates were zinc in those days, and they were made in Connecticut at what was it, Chemical Color Plate, I think it was called. But anyway, so they were the separator, hand separation. So they made these zinc plates, and then you had to express ship them to Sparta, Illinois, where the printer was. That cost a lot of money, you know. You know how heavy zinc plates are. So I mean, when I got everything on time, it didn't have to be shipped express, you know, and everything was, you know, on time. Then that saved a fortune. It saved a fortune, which gave me more money to play with, you know. And so I'd come up with some other crazy idea to try to make things better. I used to have other executives. They say, how do you get away with giving these people 10, 15% raises? Because our guideline is 2.5%, you know. And I say, well, you know, beat your budget, you know, and then you can do it too, you know. And so I always, you know, I did every dirty thing I could, every honest dirty thing to save money and you know and make more money than the projections, and we always did. We always did. You know, you get a bunch of people like Larry Hama, Louise Simonson, you know, Al Milgram, and Archie. Holy cow! If you can't win with that team, fire the coach.
And speaking of being the coach, you were also the public spokesman. You had, whether I don't know if you ever intended to or not, but you filled the vacuum that Stan kind of once had, being sort of the faves and the caricatures and everything else. And the EICs in between the two of you really didn't do much of that. But you decided, okay, or someone else put you up front. How did it evolve that suddenly you were, I'm Jim Starlin, and then I'm Jim Shooter, and the buck stops here?
Yeah, the thing was that see, before I even started, Stan had stopped being involved with the comics.
Yeah.
Okay. He'd been the president of the company for a while. He hated it, and so then they called him publisher, but he really wasn't doing that. Publisher is a business job, and he didn't want it. He had no interest. But so what he was Stan Lee. He was Marvel's face to the world, and so he was on the lecture circuit, and then the Spider-Man strip started, and then you know, and he was always trying to sell stuff to you know, Hollywood, you know, TV, movies, cartoons.
Yeah.
And that was his job, you know, and he didn't have anything to do with the comics. He wasn't even on the organizational chart. I did not report to him. He did not run the comic, right? I did. And but he's Stan Lee, you know, and if he wants to talk to me about the comics, you bet, you know. And so then he moves out to LA because we built a studio out there, and so he moved out there and took an office there. And he wasn't even around that much anymore. We were always sending each other. There was no email then, so we sent each other telegrams. But this is back when there were telegrams. Think about that. And
telegram for Jim Shooter.
Yeah. Anyway, so and then writing each other letters. I have all kinds of letters from Stan. And,
wow.
It was you know, and then on the phone all the time, because I mean, like, you know, sometimes I just needed to talk to somebody, you know, and ask for his advice, and he was always happy to help. I mean, he always, you know, he had a great deal of sympathy for what I was going through. And I mean, for instance, when I wanted to get the royalty program started, the projections were there was going to cost us, it was going to take $750,000 off the bottom line. So if the sales didn't go up enough because of the royalty program to cover that, then we'd be losing money, right? We'd be making money. We'd be making $750,000 less. So, you know, even though the president had told me, you can go ahead and do this, when he saw the numbers, he said, we need to talk to the board. You know, the board was for Cadence Industries, which owned Marvel, was in West Caldwell, New Jersey. And so I had to go with Galton to pitch this to the board and try to convince them, no, it's worth the risk of losing $750,000 because if we don't, we're dead. You know, because DC had announced their royalty program, and so anyway, I asked Stan if he would happen to be in the office. I asked Stan, I said, would you come with me? And he said, oh yeah, sure. So the three of us went there, and you know, it's like Stan didn't really pitch it. I pitched it, but
Yeah.
but he would do things like, he's right, and so we convinced the board to do it, and we got permission from the board, and then it actually didn't cost us $750,000. It cost us $2 million the first year. $2 million. What that means is that we sold way more than projections, way more, because we kept the good guys we got, guys who had left, came back. We had new guys dying to get in because you can make money, and you can make money tomorrow. So anyway, it was an adventure. But I mean, Stan, he was always helpful. He always, he had a great deal of sympathy for my problems.
But in between you and Stan, I mean, you've got, Len did a run, Roy did a run, did a run.
Jerry Conway and Archie.
Right. Yeah. But none of them, you're the first one after Stan that really is a caricature in the comics. That's really a personality that connected, I think, with fans. You were always out there. Like Stan had a soapbox, but I always remember you were, I'd seen the names of the other guys, but then I saw your name, but I also could equate you with, an image, a caricature, a face. Mm-hmm. And there's not a lot of guys who have done that, who have come out in front and been like, I'm the guy.
Well, the thing is, all the guys before me, Roy was the first, okay? And then there was Len, Marv, Jerry Conway for 3 weeks, and then Archie Goodwin.
And Archie did it at Epic.
Yes.
Well, no, Archie was the editor-in-chief for 19 months, and then he got sick of it,
right?
And for a lot of reasons, it's a long story. But so he left to become a contract writer, all right? And he was supposed to write 3 books a month. Archie never wrote 3 books in a month, in the best month of his life. But so anyway, and meanwhile, pretty much at Stan's urging, we were going to do this. I was going to do this creator-owned magazine, right? And at first it was going to be called Odyssey, and then we found out we couldn't use that name. And then we came up with Epic Illustrated. Archie actually might have done that. I don't know. Anyway, but what I did was I talked Archie into coming back, and I said, see, Archie hated the bureaucracy. His eyes glazed over when he talked to lawyers or accountants. He just hated that stuff. I said, I'll pave the road. Yeah. So all he had to do was worry about the creative, and I did the budgets. I did the stupid paperwork. I fought with the licensing people, and then that gave Archie, a pretty free hand to do what he loved, and boy did he do it. So anyway, Archie, and that was just wonderful. And so, but we had actually this other guy, Rick Marshall, and we fired him. I actually was ordered by the president to fire him because he made a $60,000 mistake. Oof. And that wasn't his first one. Mm. And he tells the story differently, but this is true. The president Galton said, "Get rid of this guy." I said, "Okay." So I did. The thing is, we had something on a tight deadline, and he had relatives visiting from Germany, and he said, "I want to take some days off." I said, "You got a hard deadline. You can't. You have to be here." So then he calls in sick. Mm. So I actually had to fire him over the phone because he didn't show up. He kept calling in sick. So anyway, I mean, we got rid of him, and he had started on Epic, right? Then I convinced Archie to take it, and pretty much scrapped what Rick had done, and it just did it pretty much from scratch. I think he may have come up with the name Epic Illustrated because we didn't really have a name because Odyssey didn't work out. Yeah. But that's the story of how Epic got started. Started out, gave it to this guy Marshall, and then he didn't work out. The president told me to get rid of him, and then I managed to convince the greatest in the maybe the greatest ever, Archie, to come in and do it. And all I had to do was do a little bureaucracy stuff for him. Work with the bureaucrats a little, licensing people and stuff. But anyway, that was one of the best things that ever happened to me. The 2 great days when Archie came to work for me, and then I hired 3 people who all started on the same day: Denny O'Neil, Larry Hama, and Louise Simonson.
During that,
pretty good day.
It's a good bullpen.
Yeah. They're great guys. Great. They're the best team ever assembled.
So during that time, was there anything that DC did? Because you had been doing a lot of things first. You guys had 70% market share. Is there anything that you saw the other guys doing that you were like, oh, I wish we had thought of that, or I thought of that, but you guys did it first?
Well, no. I mean, the thing is that DC was part of Warner Publishing, right? And they pretty much had unlimited money. I had what I could scrape together. Yeah. So basically, one time Ed Shogun, the circulation VP of circulation, we were hanging out, and he's talking to me, and he said, "You see, DC, we did three colors plus black covers, and the colors were 25%, 50%, or 100%. Okay." And just like the interiors, right? DC did they did 4 colors, 4 levels: 25, 50, 75, 100, and they did gray tones, which we couldn't do. We just didn't have our production people they couldn't find their elbow with the other hand. So they and they also out promoted us. I mean, they spent huge amounts of money on posters and ads, and we couldn't do it. We just didn't have that much money, and so promotion, the production quality, I don't know, just various things like that we couldn't match. And so Ed Shogun, he says the only place we beat him is between the covers.
I remember DC's, what I thought, at least in the direct market, kind of their first opening volley of, "Hey, remember us? We're still here." Was their the new DC? There's no stopping us now, which is their logo, and that was
somebody had to stop them. They stopped themselves.
Yeah, as I said, they came out of the gate. They thought Ronin was really gonna hit stronger.
Well, they sold it. See, the thing is, they sold it in to the direct market really well, but nobody could read it. It was unreadable. And so I remember Bud Plant. I was out in California, and Bud Plant. I said, "How'd you do with Ronin?" He says, "I'm rolling them up and selling them as cordwood."
Oh.
And he said, "You want a cord of them?" I said, "Oh, no." Now, of course, later Frank became so famous, and so good that retroactively people wanted Ronin later. But my favorite story is that Frank went over. He didn't want to leave, but he had this big offer from Jeanette Kahn, and he said, "I don't want to leave, but I want to try this, And I said, "Well, good. Go over there." I said, "We don't want to just stay here because you think you have to, Go over there, find out you don't like it, and then come back, And that's exactly what happened. He got a pretty rotten deal on Ronin, despite all of Jeanette's promises, and a little unhappy about it. So he comes to me and he says, "I want to do a graphic novel for Marvel." I said, "Fine," but not like Ronin. And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Frank, you can't make any sense out of it." I said, "I tried, And so he gets all mad at me, and he storms out, And he had dinner with Will Eisner that night, and the subject of discussion was what a jerk I was, because I didn't like Ronin. And I guess I can say this. This is what Will said. This is exactly what he said. He said, "Frank, it's unreadable horseshit." Okay, now you can't get mad at Will because he's the god of comics, right?
Yeah.
So Frank went home and he picked Ronin off the shelf, and he hadn't looked at it for months, and he couldn't read it. He couldn't figure it out. His own work, So the next day he calls me up and he says, "Can we go to lunch?" I said, "Sure." So we went to lunch, and he told me about telling Will what a jerk I was, and And he told me the whole story, and he said I'll do it straight. I said fine. So we went back and made a contract. Now it turned out that story, as I remember it, that story became a series instead of a graphic novel. It became
board again.
Electro Assassin series.
Okay.
Right? Drawn by Bill Sienkiewicz. And Bill wasn't really into doing narrative continuity, So Frank had to carry the storytelling in the narration. But Frank is so good that he took Bill's pictures are brilliant. Like I said, they didn't make a big effort to make them flow narratively. Mm-hmm. But Frank, he said, "Okay, my job. I'll fix it," and he did. And so you had Bill's brilliant picture, and Frank's brilliant copy, and boy, that's one of the best things we ever did. And so next time, P.S. I was pretty good friends with Will too, and so the next time I saw him, I said, "Tell me what happened, word for word."
Well, as I said, yeah, because Elektra, the one-shot graphic novel they did with Kingpin, and Miller on the Born Again miniseries, which I sat with him one time and I said, "Look, everybody deserves it as one of the greatest Daredevil stories of all time." Yeah. I maintain it's one of the best Captain America stories ever as well. And he actually lit up and he was like, "Thank you." The only smile I got.
But so that was when Frank really hit his stride.
Yeah.
I remember the day. He used to bring the jobs into me when he was just starting out. He would before he would take the job of the editor, he'd bring it to me. And I'd look through it and I'd say, Frank, look, you got two guys in this panel talking, and in the next panel now there's a third guy. Was he here all along, or did he just come in? Did he hear what they said? And Frank, and then, or I'd say, like, Frank, you're shooting this from an angle we cannot possibly tell what the vector of the action is. You can't tell what the movement is. Yeah. You got to. The clearest way is perpendicular. Okay. Point of view perpendicular to the vector of the action. All right. Now, that also could be pretty boring sometimes. So you might, pick a slightly different angle, but make it clear. Anyway, so this goes on for a while, and finally one day he comes to my office, and he says, "I got it." I said, "You got it?" He said, "Yeah, we're telling stories." I said, "Yeah, okay." He said, "We know the story, and they don't know the story. And we're telling them the story." I said, "Yes." Now, see, I know what he meant. That sounds stupid, but I know what he meant. What he meant was he realized that when you think of a story, you see a little movie in your mind. You don't see still pictures. You see a little movie in your mind. When you understand that your job as a cartoonist is to make those people see the same movie. So then he started doing those innovative stuff on Daredevil. Was great, and he just started to hit his stride. And boy, he's good. He is so good. I mean, he's a little stylized. It's sort of like Milgram, except his style is a little blitzier. It was great storytelling, brilliant narrative. But that I remember the moment when he got it. When it finally occurred to him, this is what we're doing.
And
hanging around with Will Eisner probably didn't hurt. But then he's a force of nature. Leave him alone.
And this eye of yours, this apprenticeship and training and all this stuff that all your experience paid very well in the Valiant line, because that was a weird time in comics where you were the yin to Image Comics' yang, where everything's very explosive, splash pagey and stuff. But first thing about Valiant that caught everybody's eye was just like, this is narrative. This is panel to panel continuity, and this is grounded. And I would never call it old fashioned for its time, but it was like, for lack of a better term, it was readable.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I figured, like, what do we can't afford these, expensive hot shots. We didn't have any money. I mean, I had Don Perlin. Don was not glitzy and flashy, but he was really solid. He was an excellent storyteller. And good, he could draw, but he just wasn't flashy, Yeah. We had Barry Windsor Smith. And I thought, hey, why? Why did we get Barry Windsor Smith? Because he had burned his bridges at Marvel, and he burned his bridges at DC, and no place else to go. And so, and I knew him, and also Bob Layton knew him. So we got him to come down and talk to him, and he agreed to work for us. And I thought, oh, good, Barry, big name, Yeah, didn't make a dent in the sales. I don't know why, but I mean, he wasn't that hot, And
I think he was hot when he did those X-Men issues.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was the X-Men, okay, on this new stuff that people didn't know. I mean, they didn't care.
He was the best X-Men artist for non-superhero X-Men stories.
Well, and also that Weapon X, Wolverine stuff. Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, he didn't like working with Chris because he felt like he had to fix it, And as a matter of fact, before he agreed to work for us, I was a writer too. Okay, I was running the joint. I was a writer. I had to audition for him. Okay, I've been doing this for how many years? And but he said I'm not going to do what I had to do with Claremont. He says you'll have to prove to me that that I'm not that I can just draw. All right, so I wrote a story and he read it and it's good. Yeah, I know. and so then he agreed to after I auditioned he agreed he would work for us. So we had him, but he didn't really make a dent. And then we had a miracle from God, David Lapham, but he was new. It took him a little while to become the genius that he is. And we had then I got guys right out of the Kubert School, and I mean, Don Parlin was great, and he worked with those kids, and he helped them a lot, And Bob would work with the young inkers,
Well, I think you suffered early on with Valiant from distribution, right? So, like when you first start, you're doing the licensed books, you're doing the Super Mario stuff, and then you create your universe. And early on, it didn't matter who you had on the books. Those initial first couple of issues, it took a little while for that stuff to click and to create an audience because you were literally starting from scratch. You were literally starting from nothing, building a cohesive universe. And
the thing is with there's a story behind us licensing those Gold Key characters because the guy who ran Western Publishing, he liked me, and he said, he says, I think you're pretty good, and I'll hold these characters for you until you're ready. He held them for 2 years. Okay.
We'll put a link up. Yeah, you told Mike this story the first time Mike sat with you. Like you said, you've got some great characters. I do.
Yeah, exactly. No, he didn't even know. But the thing is, right around the time we started, as a matter of fact, approximately a month after we started, it was like Christmas Eve or something, close to Christmas, and so I'm walking across town to Madison Avenue where I live, and Masarsky was walking across town to go to the train station because he was going to go up to his second home up in Cold Spring. And so we stand on the corner of 44th and Madison, and he said, I got to tell you something. I said, okay, what? He says, I'm dating Melanie. Melanie was the person who ran the venture capital firm that funded us. She was the banker. I'm like, talk about a conflict of interest, And so I called my financial guy, Winston Folks. I said, what are we going to do? And he said, well, I'm going to talk to the other partner in the venture firm. And so he talked to him, and they fired him. Or they made me fire him. They couldn't. I had a big chunk of stock, and so I had enough control that they couldn't fire him without me. And they so what they did is they kept hammering me about, but he can't use a computer. He does his accounting on green sheets. We're financial experts. So well, how can you defend somebody? You don't know this stuff. Yes, I do. But anyway, So finally I said, all right, I'll tell you what. When Winston tells me he's okay with it, I said, then you got my vote. And so he actually made a pretty good deal for himself. He ended up, owning 10% of the company and getting paid out his whole contract. And then he filed for unemployment on top of that, which really peeved him. And anyway, so now Masarsky and Melanie together, Triumph Capital, that's a venture firm, and Masarsky, he's her partner, not my partner. And since they control the board, he decides we're not going to do my superheroes. We're going to do Nintendo comics. Why? Because he was Nintendo's lawyer for media and entertainment. And so he was making a deal with himself. He was on both sides of the table.
Oh.
And he got paid a big fee, by us.
Oh, wow.
And then when that failed, because we did our best, but that wasn't likely to succeed. Then guess who else he represented? World Wrestling. And so now we're doing wrestling comics. And again, there were some good things about each of those, but I think we're not likely to succeed. And we did our best, but then finally I got to do my superheroes, and Mike's exactly right. It wasn't the hottest thing on earth, but I said, what do we get to fight with? We can fight back with story, because these other guys doing flashy art and no story, a very thin story,
Yeah.
And so I said, well, we'll do lots of content. We'll make good stories. We'll tell them clearly, tell them well, and maybe we don't have the hottest guys in town, but we got Don Perlin, and he tells a hell of a story. We got Barry Windsor-Smith, and he tells a good story. Barry was, it's a good thing he needed us, because I said, as Barry, we're doing rectilinear panels, in the grid. And he's like, well, that's stupid. We should be able to do overlapping inset, blah, blah. I said, no, if that's what you want to do, you can't work it. And so I won that fight. There was a couple times where he demanded things that, okay. It was like, it's always sort of the nuclear option either way. We had
battle.
Yeah, we had him, and then we had David Lapham. My God, miracle from God. And and the other artists were they were learning, and getting better and better, but they told the story clearly.
Yeah.
And because I made them, I said, look, all we get to fight with is story.
And the irony is that your way won out, but
Yes.
by that time you were leaving the company.
Yep.
I remember Bloodshot 1 coming out the same weekend as Superman 75. Death of Superman.
Right.
And I remember how hot that book was, but that was because it had just been built up off the,
Yeah, I was in at the beginning of that. I did the kind of the foundation story for Bloodshot. They kind of took it off in a different direction after I was gone, but
you made the groundwork for the company, where by that point in time, the retailers and distributors were actually ordering the books, paying notice, and readers were, loving the content.
Yeah, and by the time we did Unity, which was a crossover within the book, within the titles, within the 8 titles, man, we were making big money, and we were selling like crazy. And we got, in terms of profit, Marvel had 156 titles a month. We had 8. We out-earned them 10 to 1 in terms of profit. 10 to 1.
Incredible.
With 8 books. That's pretty good.
Now, there's a fun story behind this cover, isn't there?
Yeah, this story involves a black hole. And so Don Perlin and Barry Windsor-Smith, they alternated doing covers because neither one could do them all. So it was Barry's turn. And so he was up in Woodstock. And so, he didn't have to come to the office. I made most other people come to the office every day, but he did. He's Barry Windsor-Smith. Leave him alone.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're faxing sketches back and forth, and he wasn't entirely comfortable with things I suggested, and I didn't like what he was doing. And so we're faxing, and finally, in frustration, he says, "Let's just make the whole thing black." I said, "You got it." He said, "I was kidding." I said, "I'm not. That's what we're doing." He said, "No, I was kidding. It was a joke." I said, "Barry, that's what we're doing. Send me a cover sketch." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Draw a rectangle and make it black." And he faxed it to him. So he did. We paid him for a cover sketch. And I said, "Now draw the cover." "What?" Let's draw a slightly bigger rectangle and color it black. In fact, we paid him to draw the cover. You can see his signature in the lower left-hand corner of that cover. That's a rubber stamp, by the way. But the thing is, he's like, "You're out of mind." I think we paid him $450, $500, something like that, for the sketch and the cover. And I figured, look, we really can't pay him as much as he deserves. So this is a little bonus. It's in the budget. We'll pay him. So I did. He thought it was crazy, but I don't care. And all the people at the company thought it was crazy. The marketing guy thought it was crazy. Lazarski thought I was crazy. The Janet Jackson, our designer and Jackson of all trades, she's out of your mind. I said, no, I'm not. No, I know what I'm doing. So she said, well, can I do like a spot varnish, maybe emboss the logo so there's some chance that people can tell what this is? I said, yeah, that's fine, as long as it's all black, So she did, and she even embossed Barry's little signature. And we had orders for 40,000, which is not good. I mean, it was about 30,000 was our break even. 40,000, it's not great. But we supplied our own paper. You can supply your own paper to the printer, or you can let them supply the paper. You can save money if you buy your own paper. So we bought our own paper. So the production guy says to me, he says, well, they think they have enough paper to do the 40,000, but they won't have much left. I said, run to the end of the paper, use it all. So it actually turned out to be 50,000 copies that we printed. Well, when that book hit the stands, that was sold out in an hour. The reason we know that is because the phones were ringing off the hook from all across the country. Because the way the direct market worked in those days is they timed it so everybody got their books at the same time, so nobody had an advantage. Okay, and so like within an hour of those books hitting the store, sold out, including the extra 10,000. And so we had to go back to press, and then this is the second printing. A little 2 up there, I think. Yeah. Yeah. So then we had to do a second printing, and this was our first giant hit. I think I don't know, it might have been 1 million copies.
Wow.
When it was all said and done. It was our first giant hit. And then this particular story sort of teed up Unity, and then Unity just put us over the top, worked my tail off on that story. And, the people did some really good work. David Lapham did miraculous work on the Harbinger. Don did great work on the solar thing. Everybody poured their hearts into it. We cared about it. And that really put us over the top. And then soon after that, they got rid of me.
I'm throwing back at what you said, those numbers you just threw out. I printed up 40,000 for order, and 30,000 was a make or break. And now the big two, anything above 25,000 is a godsend.
Yeah, but my goal was to get everything above 100,000. Because when I was at Marvel, every single title sold more than 100,000. Every single one. Okay, DC had 3 titles that sold more than 100,000. Every one of ours did. And so that was kind of the threshold that I wanted to reach. Yeah. And then once we hit Unity, I mean, it's, I don't know, selling 300,000-400,000 of each thing, and then it went up from there. And then Bloodshot, wow. And for a while there, Valiant was really flying. I wasn't involved anymore, but I always say that publishing comics is like piloting a hot air balloon. Okay, you turn the heat up, and it doesn't go anywhere for a while, and then it starts to rise slowly, right? And then it starts to rise faster, faster, faster. All right, you turn the heat off. It'll continue to rise for a while.
Yeah.
And it'll level off, and it will slowly drift out. Okay, and that's exactly how it works in comics. The first Valiant books, it was like just starting off from the ground in your hot air balloon. It took a while, and then it just took off. And then after I left, it kind of started. The whole industry went down, but Valiant crash and burn.
Speaking of balloons, I do love this story. I would love you to share it with this audience. After you left Marvel, you were still doing some consulting work, and then they gave you a call like, can you fix the Macy's Day Parade Spider-Man balloon?
Yeah. Yeah, it was Joe Calamari called me. He was the executive vice president at that point. And he called me up and he says, we need you to consult. I said, why? He said, well, we're doing this balloon for the Macy's parade. And he says, this is not, it doesn't look right. They originally took John Romita to this place in, I think, Jersey City, where they have the balloon shop, where they'd sculpt the model for the balloon. And the model was sent to Akron, Ohio, where the balloon was made. All right. So, so on the way there, and Calamari says, "Well, you always go with the toys and stuff." He says, "I think Romita, he can only do two-dimensional stuff. He can only just draw on paper." He said, "But you seem to understand, three-dimensional." I said, "John can do anything, But here's the thing. So this guy was the head sculptor there. Big ego, arrogant guy. I mean, just amazing. I mean, and so he sculpted what looked like Casper the Ghost proportions. Looked like Spider Baby taking a really difficult poop. I mean, anyway, he was just all crunched up, and it just looked dumb. And so I look at it, and then I realized this arrogant guy. He started arguing with me. I said, we have to change this. The proportions are all wrong and stuff like that. You need this arm forward and that leg back. And he said, "Oh, I'd have to cut the frame." I thought, there's a frame? But then he said, "You just don't understand it. You have to mask the gas cells, and you have to do this and do that." And I said, I see. See, John is too polite. Okay, John is the nicest, sweetest man in the world. And he also has tremendous respect for other artists. Okay, so there's this guy who's a sculptor, and the guy says it can't be done, and John says, "Oh, okay," because he did, wasn't going to argue with the guy. So they brought in the bad cop. Okay? Uh-huh. And so I said, "Well, you're just going to have to cut the frame," And anyway, so I explained to him the proportions and the crawling pose and the head size. And so it took a couple trips, but finally got it looking sort of like Spider-Man, And I said, "Don't even try to do the webs. Forget that. Don't even try." I said, and we brought John Romita back, and John did the webs. He drew the webs on, and it came out pretty good. It came out pretty good. P.S. At the same time, they had decided they wanted to do a float for the parade too, and so they asked me if I'd help with that. So I designed the float. Okay, what I did was I did a sort of kind of a cross-section shot of New York City. On the top of one tower, there's the Silver Surfer, the Doctor Strange's house, and I don't know what else. Oh, and in the underground, there was a secret laboratory where Dr. Doom was, and then the lizards crawling around there, and I said, "How about can we make a building that the Hulk can push over, and then it'll come back, And they said, "Yeah, we can do that." And I said, "Okay, let's do that." And so that was a big hit actually. And what they did was they got all the costume characters, who weren't on the float, to walk along beside the float, And so everyone was very popular. I mean, I was watching this parade, and people just screaming and clapping, and just they loved it. And I think those days, I think he had like a 2-year contract. It might have been 3. I don't know. But anyway, after that, they retired the float, and they're stuck with a balloon. And they've made a new balloon. It's a little bit different. Instead of crawling, he's shooting his web.
Right.
It's very similar.
It's funny because about 2 years ago, somebody had posted a YouTube of the floats, of the float scene and everything else. There's not much between Mike and I that we don't know about, and neither of us has seen this before. And we were both like, "Have you seen this?" Yeah, we saw it. And,
Okay, cool.
and we were like, why didn't we know about this? You know, just, yeah. But yeah, it was absolutely.
It came out really cool. I mean, the people who do this work, I mean, that sculptor is, he's a madman, but he's a very talented madman. In fact, when he was doing the whole argument with me about the gas cells being masked and this and that, over in the corner there is the sculptor of Ronald McDonald doing a handstand, handstand. I said, if you can do that, you can do this, you know. And he's really peeved at me, but you know, we're the client, so they had to do it. And yeah. Anyway, I those things came out pretty good, and I got paid, and that was good. And I think it's like I said, it's not that John couldn't do this, maybe and probably better than me, but he's just too polite. They needed the bad cop.
The Ramirez are very polite.
Yes, although John Jr. is one of the finest gentlemen I've ever met. You know, I mean, we run into each other at conventions stuff sometimes and hang out a little bit, and probably drink too much. But you know, I mean, he's such a gentleman. He's such a good man, and he's so talented. You know, he's going to be Hall of Fame.
Yeah, well, he absolutely is Hall of Fame, but he, as a human being, he's such a
he's a gentleman.
Yeah,
he's really great, and he's in tremendous shape. He's a great athlete. You know, he's you know, I don't know how old he is. He's not that much younger than me, and you know, he's just you know, he's a modern miracle.
Humble and talented, and you know,
nice. He's nice.
Yeah.
And you know, which, you know, your famous quote, I think, for working for Marvel during your tenure is you either had to be really nice, really good, or really fast, and it was any two of those three, right?
No, I never said that.
No, you never said that?
No.
Oh, I thought you had written that somewhere.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, well, I misquoted.
I mean, if you can find it and prove it to me, I guess I'll have to believe.
I'll have to
empirical evidence, but I never said anything like that. All I wanted was, I think the nice part was I wanted to have good people and people who cared, and of course I wanted, you know, talented people with, you know, real skills, and if you happen to be fast, that's convenient. But I didn't really care about fast. Like, you figure out how fast the guy is. If the guy can do one book a month, yeah, okay, let him do one book a month. If he can only do one book every 3 months, have him do an annual. You know, you know. I mean, you know, you just get the right situation for him. You know,
I miss annuals so much.
Yeah, we did some good ones. You know, we did some good ones. Yeah. Anyway, you know, I'm not, you know, trying to you know, say that we didn't screw up sometimes, but you know, I think we did have good people who cared for the most part. There was a couple who didn't.
I think we've kept you a lot longer than originally planned.
Oh, that's all right. I don't mind. I mean, are we done?
No, we could talk a few more minutes. And
okay, let's go.
What are you? Everything you've done. What do you most look back as something that you're very proud of doing? And that at the end,
right. Making things better for creators. That's the best thing I ever did.
And is there anything that you wish you could do or want to do that's you know, you can take one more swing at the ball?
You know, it sort of breaks my heart that the industry is just falling off the edge of a table. Diamond has stopped distributing new comics. You know, you know, when I was at Broadway Comics, and Broadway Comics was sold along with all the other entertainment properties that Warren Michaels owned to Golden Books Family Entertainment, and they were not interested at all in publishing comics. So we were going to get closed down. So I mean, so I knew I was not. I needed a gig, and at that time Marvel was going bankrupt. They weren't quite there yet, but they were going bankrupt. And I knew the CEO of the parent company that owned Marvel was a guy named Bill Bevins. And he had actually interviewed me to be president of the company when they first bought it. and it just didn't seem proper because he said, what would happen if you walked in there tomorrow as president? I said, well, some of the executives would dive out the window, because I know, that they're no good. Yeah. And he said, you're damn right. He says, if they all drowned in the East River, it'd be a month before anybody noticed. And I said, some would dive out the window, some would run out the door, and I'd fire some. He says, I appreciate your honesty. He said, we're going to go public, and we can't start with about bloodbath. That's not good. He said, so, maybe later. And I said, that's fine. Okay. It was a nice talking to you. He also asked me, what was your business plan? Because I tried to buy Marvel. I had to make a business plan. And I told him. He said, that's just about what we're doing. And I said, it's logical. It's the thinking man's business plan. So anyway, when Marvel was headed toward bankruptcy, he called me up, and he said, can you fix this? I said, yeah. And he said, come up to my office, let's talk. So I went up there, and we talked, and he was going to look into doing that. But the next week they went bankrupt, so they never had a chance. I tried to buy it out of bankruptcy. I found an equity partner, Perry Capital, and Chase North America, who was going to be my lending partner the first time I tried to buy Marvel. I called up the head of media and entertainment for Chase, Tom Reifenheiser, and I said, this is what I got going. And he said, you can count on our support. Okay. Now this time, the first time, it was it was sold for $82.5 million. We bid 81. Perlman bid 82.5. Wow. He wasn't even in the auction. He was an insider at the selling company. So he needed an arm's length bid, like mine, so that he could swoop in and take it. Because you need an arm's length bid so you can be a buyer as well as a seller. All right, so $82.5 million. That's a fair amount of money. And I had, between Chase and Schenkman Capital, which was my equity partner, we had that, and we had enough so that they do a process called ratcheting. If they got more than one bid, they pit you against each other. So we were even prepared to ratchet a little. Now, the second time here, buying it out of bankruptcy, even in bankruptcy, it's like $1 billion deal or more, So, nobody's gonna put up more than $1 billion for a guy with a high school education, So I got a couple guys, ex Capital Cities ABC executives, and made a deal with them. They'd handle the media. I do everything else. Publishing, licensing, and so that was so when I called Reifenheiser, they said, you don't know Reifenheiser. I said, yes, I did. So I called Reifenheiser on a conference call, a loud speakerphone, and the secretary put me right through, and he said, what can I do for you? And I said, this is what we got going. And I told him we had the Cap Cities ABC guys who had run $1 billion units for Cap Cities ABC, each of them, right? And you can count on our support, right? That's we're talking, over $1 billion, and but there were too many contingent liabilities that Marvel and Toy Biz were suing each other, and each owned each other's stock, and it was a nightmare. So you have to buy both, and so one of the Cap Cities guys said, can you run a toy company? I said, I know something about toys, but I can't run a toy company, And so I said, but we could get up another partner. And so, again, amazing them. I called Jill Barad at Mattel, and I said, Jill, we can buy this out of bankruptcy, and you guys, you don't have any boys' toys. You use this, And so she said, I was going to send my business operations guy. So she did. And he looked at all the documents and stuff. He said, let's just let it collapse and pick up the pieces. I said, it's not going to collapse. They're both bankrupt. The judge is going to just merge them and give them Chapter 7 until they get on their feet. And that's exactly what happened. But, it just fell apart. And So anyway, I made 2 tries, and couldn't get it done. And so, but it would have been good.
And the irony being, Toy Biz kind of stopped making toys once they sort of fused together. They did some stuff, Marvel stuff. Then they just licensed it out to Hasbro.
Yeah, exactly. And
bizarre, but
it's probably what I would have done. But it's logical. The Toy Biz right about then was there was just a few big hits, and that's it.
Yeah.
Star Wars, G.I. Joe, Transformers. Anyway, so I made a run at it. I can't remember where I started. I went off on that tangent, but
no, you gave us a really, really, really good history lesson and what was going on at the time, which is a lot of people. Again, people think Marvel now. They think the Disney. They think the cinematic universe, and again, a lot of that, the groundwork of that was under your tenure. And
like I said, I had the best team ever assembled. I had the fact that the industry was collapsing at that point actually worked in my favor, because I asked Louise to come and work for us. She was the editor-in-chief at Warren, and I was going to pay her more than they were paying her. But she nah, I don't think so. Well, then when Warren was going out of business, she needed a gig. Okay. And then she, said, I'll consider it, So then Milgram and Hama got, DC, all these companies are going out of business. Charlton went out of business. Warren went out of business. Archie went all reprint. What do you call it? Harvey basically stopped publishing.
No, I was reading it.
All these companies, and everybody was going down. And then DC, on one day, canceled 40% of their titles. Okay. So now there's this talent out there.
The implosion.
Don't have gigs. So that's how I got Hama and Milgram, and I conned Archie into coming back, and that's how I got Louise. And I mean, basically, we were the only game in town for a while, and we weren't doing great when I first started. For a lot of reasons. But I got the books on time, and then when I get these brilliant editors, and they bring, guys, the people who wouldn't ever work for me were thrilled to work for Louise, and I tried to, I called the Frazettas, and Ellie Frazetta was the gatekeeper. You don't talk to Frank, right? So I said, hi, my name's Jim Shooter. I said, I'm the editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics. She says, we don't like you. Hung up on me, So when Archie started, I said, I tried to get a Frazetta cover. I said, they won't even talk to me. And he said, I'll give him a call. Hey, Ellie, it's Archie. And there's today. And not only we got 2 covers. 2 covers, wow. So I mean, everybody loved Archie. People who would never work for me. Loved working for Archie, and
I've never heard a bad thing ever said about the man.
No.
I sat with Mike Zeck last summer, and he said, "No finer man, no finer writer, no finer editor."
No, absolutely. Like I said, the only thing about Archie is that he just couldn't stand the lawyers and the accountants and the bureaucrats and licensing people and all that. He couldn't stand that stuff. He just wasn't interested. It's like Stan. Stan didn't like this stuff. So I said, I'll pave the road. I'll do all that.
Sure.
You just make books, and that's how it worked. And it worked well, I was doing it anyway. I mean, I was, fighting on all this stuff anyway. I was upstairs all the time arguing with these people.
Yeah.
How do we get the mess we're in now? How do we get the mess we're in now?
How do we fix it?
Yeah.
It's the same way that it's been done for 40,000 years, which is tell good stories, tell them well. And they lost that. They got on this social justice warrior kick. And look, even if you agree with all this stuff, and then fine, maybe a lot of people do. It's propaganda. And even if you agree with it, nobody wants to read propaganda. It's tell a good story, tell it well. And if a character has an opinion, a social justice warrior opinion, it's the character's opinion. It's not something you're jamming down people's throat.
Well, Marvel always had social issues in their series.
Yes, you can do that, but what you can't do is make the book about some social justice issue. You can't, because then nobody wants to read it. You know, and so it's the same thing. It's just like with Venom. Tell good stories, tell them well. Except these days, they have a lot of great artists out there. If you got them to actually tell the story, and if the story was good, knock it out of the park.
This is one thing we've spoken this before at our other shows. The one thing I think the industry desperately needs right now is the editorial mentorship. And
nobody teaches anything anymore.
Talent doesn't do this anymore. And we're also missing those days when you do a little, your first assignment, you'd get a little 5-page backup story in an annual or something, and just to get your chops with. And you get those like that way too. And these little stuff. And when editors would actually edit. Yes,
and they taught.
Yes.
I got these great editors. You stay in a room with Archie for 10 minutes and you walked out smarter. Louise taught people. Larry, my God, Larry taught with an iron fist. No, but he was great. Who was it? Jeff Isherwood tells a story about he got a job that Larry was his first job with Marvel. Larry was the editor. And Larry explained to him what he wanted. And Jeff went off and did layouts or something. He brings him and shows to Larry. He says, "It's terrible." And what he did is he took a tissue paper, put over each page, and he just said, "This is what it should be. This is what it should be." And Isher would learn more in that one job than a year of art school. And Carl Potts taught people, and Milgram was great. And the other ones were too. I mean, Bobby Yansky. Who else do we have?
But it's like now a lot of guys are still self-taught. Kubert School puts out good students. SVA still put out good students. But there's this no man's land now from between getting an academic type training and then the practical training. And it used to be editorially there was a buffer for that. And
at least at Marvel there was. I mean, DC, like I said, they kind of lost some of their best young guys, Larry, Al, when they imploded, they lost my game.
Yeah,
and, it was so I had, like I said, I had the best crew on earth. It was you couldn't do, and the fact that the industry was kind of collapsing meant these people were free to come.
Yeah, and that measure also works with writing as well too. Somebody would get a little do a 6-page backup recapsulate Spider-Man's origin in 6 pages for us, something like that. Then you get the script. No. This scene here, you could make this character here, and that's gone now. And I think that's where a big thing is going on in writing comics now. When you talk about there's a political side to it, but new writers aren't getting a sense of the narrative.
No, nobody's teaching them. So Archie, when he came to do Epic, I said, Archie, if you steal an assistant editor from one of the other guys, I said, I consider this prestigious. I consider this a reward, and I'll get him a raise. And so he chose Mary Jo Duffy. All right. I'm telling you, when she walked in that room and started working with Archie, she wasn't ready for prime time, But you hang around with Archie for a while, and she learned. She's a sharp lady, and she's smart, and she picked up on everything he said. And before you know it, she's dangerous. She's writing some really great stuff. Because Archie, in his subtle way, in his gentle way, taught. And everybody benefit from him being I'm a little too bombastic, I guess, but we're both saying the same thing.
But
it's just that he was the kinder gentleman.
That's a management technique. You have somebody that compliments you and your style and everything else, and
and some people, like Frank Miller, responded to, because I thought you're an adult and you're a professional. I'm going to tell you what you need to know, And then, and I told him what he needed to know. And then, like I say, he's breakthrough, and then he's genius. And then now I'm learning from him. I'm looking at stuff he's doing. And I'm like, holy cow, I never thought of that. But I mean, different styles and stuff. I mean, Larry was pretty strict taskmaster. Carl Potts was a little gentler. I mean, Louise was just so sweet. I mean, he didn't want to let her down, and she'd explain to you, well, I had this tremendous group of people, and boy, that if I hadn't had them, I probably would have blown the whole thing. But
was there my last question, then we'll probably wrap up, but was there ever a project that you were cultivating, working on, maybe it was on a slow burn that never made it to the finish line, that you look back on, boy, I really would have loved to have seen that on the stands? No,
everything we wanted to do, we did.
Right on.
Some interviewer asked me, like, well, did you have a lot of trouble convincing the powers that be, to do this 12-issue crossover thing? I said, I didn't have to ask anybody. I did. We pretty much did what we wanted, and also we had room to experiment. Because we were making money and doing pretty well. So when Bill Sienkiewicz was going into his crazy experimental stage, Chris Claremont needed an artist for the New Mutants, and I guess I don't know. I guess the editor said, go ask Jim, and I think it was either Andescendi or it was Louise, I'm not sure, but anyway, so they come to me and they said, we want to do New Mutants together, and Chris says, but we want to do it all experimental, because that Bill was in his crazy phase, and but he's a genius, So anyway, I thought, well, Chris is pretty good. He'll figure it out, and Bill is a genius, Okay, let him go. And so we did it, and then it was really wild, crazy experimental stuff. And the newsstand sales fell, but the direct market, because we love this stuff, and we're willing to sit there and figure it out, And also, Carl Potts comes to me and he says he wants to do this thing called Strike Force Moratorium. I said, well, that just trips off your tongue, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, Carl deserves a chance to try. If he fails, he'll learn, But as long as I was there, we were still publishing. It was still outselling Superman by
that title was ahead of the curve in the sense that you had a cast that you would get attached to, but nobody was safe. Anybody could die at any moment.
Exactly. There was a lot of good about it. I'm just saying the title right away.
Yeah.
You can't even read it.
And Sienkiewicz's run on New Mutants, that was a leveling up for me, just as awareness of all this, because the first two issues, I was like, I can't understand this, but by the third issue, I was in, and I had leveled up in awareness of what this form could do. That pulled me through comic book puberty, for lack of a better term.
The thing was, it was like I said, the newsstand, which dealt with younger readers, new readers, more often, the sales fell. But the direct market, people were willing to sit there and figure it out. And once they started figuring it out, I mean, the art was brilliant. It's just that it wasn't very straightforward. That's all right. We're Marvel Comics. If we can't experiment, who can?
And I was a little younger than Patty by a few years, and I loved New Mutants with when it was Chris and Bob McLeod.
Yeah,
the traditional stuff, and then Sienkiewicz comes on. And it took an issue or two, but it really kind of opened me up to so many things.
Yeah. Well, the guy's a genius. I mean, it's he's, like I said, it was kind of in his weird phase, but he's a genius, so the thing is, even if you didn't understand it, or at first it just put you off a little bit, you had to look at those pictures and say, that's really good, and then you do this crazy stuff.
I still have to laugh that even to this day, nobody knows how to draw his version of Warlock, because that was the character he designed. And
I don't know, Jackson Geist, Butch Geist did a really good Warlock,
Really?
There's some people who made a good attempt at it. I'll tell
Yeah,
you
they
that.
were close. They were close.
Not quite Bill's, but
No.
Who did the big jam poster of the cast later on? Whoever did that did a really good Warlock. I always noticed that.
I don't know. I can't remember.
Yeah.
One time, I gotta say this. One time, the editor's offices all had these glass walls, you know, the big windows facing in, and so all the guys in the bullpen could just look at them, you know, and they all felt that they were in a fishbowl. So and some people upstairs also had the glass walls, and so we formed a little, you know, citizens vigilance committee, and we convinced, I guess it was Barry Kaplan, that we needed curtains. You know, they put curtains up. And then, a year later, somebody comes down and says, "Jim, they're taking the curtains down," you know? And so I guess, oh, let me see what's happening. So I go out and I ask the guys, "What's going on?" He said, "We're taking them to the cleaners, and they'll be back in a week," you know? Oh, okay, all right. So I told the guys, I said, you know, and they were all disgruntled and stuff, you know, in a fishbowl again. So I told my secretary, Lynn Cohen, I said, you know that store, and I think it's in the, well, no, it doesn't matter what it is. It's, I said, that sells Christmas stuff all year round. I said, get one of the boy interns, big strong guy. I said, go over there and buy me a case of spray snow. I'll give you the money. And a case of spray snow. And she's, what? I said, never mind. So she picks one of the kids. She ran the interns. She was in charge of that, among other things. So they go over to the Christmas store and they come back with this big case of spray snow. And she said, "What do you want me to do with this?" I said, "Take it in, put it on this sort of shelf thing." It was actually the tops of filing cabinets that we used as a table, more or less. And I said, "Put it on there, open the box, and walk away." You know. So she did, right? And so people are like, "What's in the box?" You know, and they find out it's spray snow. Before you know it, they're drawing on the windows with spray snow, not just painting it, not just covering it, but drawing it. And Bill Sienkiewicz did the Warlock.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So he was doing it on, I think, Ann Nocenti's window, but he just went crazy because, you know, Warlock is weird and does strange things. Yeah. And so he started going up onto the roof and onto the walls, and he did it on the carpet and sprayed it everywhere. You could not restrain him. He was, you know, irrepressible. And so president of the company used to come down through our floor. There was a stairway connecting the 10th floor. I guess we were the 9th floor. And he would come down the stairs at night and walk through our floor to get to the freight elevator, because that was easier than taking the elevator. His floor didn't have a freight elevator. So he would have had to go down and walk all the way around the building to get to his place in Gramercy. And so he would take the shortcut, which is through our floor. And he saw this and he goes berserk. You know, thing is, he was afraid of me for some reason. Maybe because he was like 5'2" or something. But so whenever he was mad, he would go yell at the mailroom guy, Joe in the mailroom, and then Joe would come and say, "Gee, Galvin's really mad, you know. What now? You know, oh, the stuff on the windows." And I said, "Look, it's mostly done by freelancers. It's on their own time, you know? And the other guys did it on their lunch hour, you know." I said, "So I said, I'll write him a memo." So I wrote him a memo saying, you know, "Look, this was all done by, you know, people on their own time. You know, it's, you know," I said, "we will clean these windows ourselves before the curtains come back. You know, in the meantime, you know, let the kids have fun." Right? And I get, I think Joe said, you know, the Galvin still wasn't happy. And so I sent him a memo saying, "I understand the upstairs curtains are going out in the next week. If you want us, we'll paint your windows." I never got a reply. I don't know why. But, you know, but the guys were good. They came in and they scraped it off with a razor blade, and, you know, and we cleaned the windows and swept up the dust. And, you know, I mean, it was good, clean fun. everybody had a great time, And that was kind of, a lot of crazy stuff like that went on, and you have to, because you're working 12 hours, 14 hours, you need to do something stupid.
Oh, we know that things are crazy there because we saw that in the Marvel Fumetti book.
Well, yeah, I mean, see, remember I told you about DC had better production?
Yeah.
Well, we had the guy who did our production, our printing production, was a man named Milt Shipman. And Milt was a very nice man. Okay. And but the thing is, when it was owned by Martin Goodman, Milt Shipman was he was an MBA and he was a lawyer, right? And so he was sort of the whole all-in-one executive resource, I guess. So anyway, when Galton came in, he said, maybe it was even Al Lando, whatever. But when one of those two guys came in, they didn't want him, doing that. They brought in Barry Kaplan, who was, smart guy. And Milt just wasn't qualified. He was an older guy, and he was, came from the dinosaur era, and but they didn't want to fire him or anything. I mean, he's only his vice president, And so what they did is they said, we'll put him in charge of the printing production. He didn't even have a secretary. All he did all month is once a month we would get the bill from World Color Press and from Chemical Color Plate, and he'd sign off. That's it. His whole job. He didn't even have secretaries. He's vice president, no secretary. Well, when you're only publishing, the very ordinary, old-fashioned color comics, there's nothing to do. It's like, does World Color Press forget how to do it? No. So then when we started trying to do more complicated stuff, he just didn't get it, So the Fumetti book was photographed, I think, by Elliot Brown, and it was nice, beautiful. He's a good photographer. Yeah. Great photos, and they were all nice and clear and stuff like that. Milt sent them to a hand separator. He sent the book to Chemical Color Plate. They get this book with photos in it. They didn't know what to do, but they said, oh, okay. So you notice it's all kind of grainy and blurry.
Yeah.
Because it was done this thing was shot by hand separators, who were used to shooting cells. And so it comes out all kind of, look at this book, what happened? But you can still kind of see what's going on there.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and it was funny. And of course you had crazy guys like Mark Gruenwald and other people who just wanted to do ridiculous things. Like Mark was the one who came up with the idea of the human pyramid.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to figure out who gets to be on the bottom. I mean, I could be on the bottom, but I'd be the wrong height. It wouldn't match everybody else. But we figured it out. I think Louise was on top. And so I was behind, doing this because I couldn't be on top of anybody. I'm too big. I'm huge. Because that was kind of funny. Building the human pyramid with a lot of kind of not so athletic editors. Say all kinds of silly stuff like that. So in a way, it's worth it anyway. But I mean, it's really sad that Milt sent a book of photographs to a hand separator. That's what we were up against,
Yeah.
It was really tough. And so I tried to weigh in and Milt, this is what we need to do. I had this argument with him once because we were doing, I think it was called Weird World or something. Doug Mensch.
Oh, Pat Broderick.
No, it was John Buscema.
Okay.
It was painted by Peter Ledger.
Okay.
But it was like a sort of a elves and
I remember the book. Yeah, it was a little
So anyway, Doug wrote a good story. It was pretty good. So anyway, I thought, this looks pretty good. It
was a Marvel premiere.
I said, maybe we could use a better magenta ink on this, a red ink, And I said, maybe we could upgrade the ink. He said, Jim, you don't understand. He says, there's only three inks. There's, cyan, yellow, and magenta. I said, Milt, there are more than 3 inks in the world, So somebody was arguing, you know. And so what I did is I said, let's skip this guy. So I called East Coast Graphics, and I said to the guy, so if I send you a couple of pages, can you pull some proofs for me? Sure, you know. So I said, what I want proofs with the regular ink, which is called rhodine, and the one step up from there, which is called rhodamine. And so they did, and now I had pages, to hold side by side, and the difference was spectacular. But it was going to cost us an additional $1,100. So I thought, I better check with Golden, because I was new then, and I wasn't as confident. I mean, later I would have done it.
Yeah.
But I thought I'd check with Golden. And Golden, I told him it's going to cost $1,100. He's no, I don't want to do it. I said, look how good it looks, and it deserves it, Oh, we're not doing it. Why did I ask him? But anyway, so Milt thought there was like exactly one red ink in the world.
Wow.
I think, God damn it. Sorry, I was up against this all the time.
No wonder your predecessors didn't last as long as they did.
Patty, you weren't wrong about Pat Broderick. He did 2 issues of a Weird World story in Marvel Fanfare a few years later. So
I'm talking about the original magazine.
The
which was
the one in 77.
Yes.
Drawn by John Buscema, and this Australian painter named Peter Ledger painted it over John's pencil.
Yes. And Rudy Nebre's.
Yes, right, exactly. Good old Rudy, man. Heavy duty Rudy. Yeah, no, he was great. I used to love it when Gil Kane would draw Conan. It was good, great. In fact, it was tremendous. But Gil had a way of sort of elongating the figures because he was a tall guy and that looked right to him. And he always put like an extra joint in the wrist. and so when Rudy would, for some reason, I guess he didn't want to spend money on erasers because I wasn't paying for everything at that point. And so he would bring the pages to the office and he'd get an eraser and he'd erase the pages. And the thing is, before he erased it, you could see that like Gil had the arm like that long and Rudy shortened it to make it more Rudy proportions. Rudy's about 4 foot nothing.
Okay.
But it was pretty. But you could see, like, he just like fixes things as he inks them, and he's a great artist. A tremendous artist. I think when I was in Charlotte a couple of years ago, he was there, and he was like, we hadn't seen each other forever, and really nice to see him.
It's cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of Bill Sienkiewicz and weird stuff, you have he did a portrait of you.
Yes. It's pretty funny. I don't know where we were. I was 29 years old. And I don't know where I was with it. And he was fairly new, but he was already a genius. And he said to me, he said, for your birthday, he says, I'm going to paint your portrait. I said, oh, wow, that'd be nice. So, he comes in and it's wrapped up and stuff like that. Take it off, the paper off. And it's a portrait of me from here down. Just cut my head off. And I said, Bill, he says, that's what I see when I look at you. Because Bill's a little guy, short.
Yeah.
But it was, anyway, the painting is brilliant. It hangs in my dining room, and ordinarily I wouldn't put a portrait of myself in my home, but I don't even have to tell the story. People walk in, they see it, and they just start laughing.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's really great. It's very. I actually have a picture in my show and tell book that I take at conventions. I have that photo of that in there. And so again, I tell the story, but I don't have to. They look at it.
Much earlier in the conversation, you mentioned Al Puestino.
Yes.
And you got to work with him very early on.
Yep.
Did you see Al in the last couple years of his life?
No.
It
didn't have occasion to be up that way.
He was such a dapper guy.
Oh yeah. When I met him the first couple times, yeah, I agree.
He he did one of our shows in 2012 or 2013, and he was just so great. And he just,
No, I liked. He, like I said, I did layouts for every panel of every story, and he helped me. I mean, like he basically followed what I did, but he'd make little subtle changes to make it better. Or sometimes, the page I have in my show and tell book, I have the comic book, and I have my Xerox, a really terrible Xerox of my layouts for the same page that I'm showing in the comic book, and you can see in the first panel that he saw that I made a mistake, and this should be over here, and so he moved, he fixed it, and I learned from him. I said, oh, I see, I get it, and but other than that, every other panel on that page, he just did exactly what except the last panel, I had the character sort of profile, and he cheated him toward the camera a little bit so you could see his expression better, which I thought, hey, this guy knows what he's doing, and so it was kind of fun working with him. Kurt Swan, oh my God, all-time great Grandmaster, Hall of Fame. That was fun.
Did you ever? Did Swan ever do anything on Marvel?
No, I asked him if he would do something. He's retired, but I asked him if he'd do Starseed at Broadway. Broadway?
Oh wow! Okay,
no,
yeah,
Broadway. And so, of course, this is me. So there's a lot of content in the script. A lot of I kept calling for things that are real, like the Chrysler Building, stuff like that. Yeah, he just didn't want to do it. He said he wanted to draw Metropolis. He didn't want to have to draw. He didn't want to get reference and stuff. I said, I'll get you all the reference. He said, no thanks. So I mean, in a gentlemanly way, he politely declined, and that was sad because I would have really loved to work with him one more time.
That's raises an interesting point, though. That again, artists only in past like 2 decades, but anytime before that, reference alone, artists used to just artists, you'd always hear about them cutting out pictures out of magazines just in case they might use them later on and stuff. No more of this digital. Oh, let me look that up real quick. Okay, I can draw that.
Yeah.
Reference was, I'll provide you a reference.
Artists had books. I've heard stories of old time guys who would have just books of reference material.
Yeah.
That they would just
I used to go to the library a lot, back before computers.
Yeah.
And get reference, the photocopy stuff, and things like that for the artists.
And you could kind of get an idea of what artists may have been interested in by how technical the details were. Like I always figured Mike Zeck must have a lot of gun magazines in his files.
Yeah, well, no, Mike really knows his stuff with it when it comes to firearms. Yeah. And Larry Hama, got it right or else. It was.
I heard the stories about his Uzi and the suitcase and all that crazy stuff he used to do.
Oh well, I mean, a lot of that is, I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying there was.
He kind of admits he's
overblown. Mike Zeck tells the story. He worked in Wallywood's studio for a while, and Wallywood had a bunch of guys working for him, and when they needed a break, they go out and they get their guns, and they do target practice, on cans and stuff, just to blow off a little steam. And so when Mike came there the first day, Woody said, "Do you have a gun?" And I said, "No." He said, "I'll give you one." So he gives Mike his gun, and then he pulls out his gun, and he shoots a bullet into the floor. And then Mike says, "Okay." He shoots a bullet in the floor. Okay. I mean, he just regaled me with all this stuff, and he was very sad because I think Mike was like the last guy to see him. He brought him home from the hospital, and that night he killed himself. So it was very sad. He was very sick, very much in pain. I think that he just figured his time was done. And so you have to have Mike tell you that story, but it's really it's sad. And I got to know Woody a little bit because he did some work for Marvel, and he'd worked with me at DC, and so we had a couple of nice chats. And it's odd saying just a couple of weeks, I guess, before he died, they had this banquet in San Diego. It wasn't the Ink Portal Wars; it was a banquet for some reason. And so it was one of the greatest nights because there I am sitting there. I got Wally Wood to my right. I got Adam West and his wife to my left.
Oh wow,
that was fun. That was great. And Woody, he looked kind of gray-skinned, and he was wearing. I mean, it was hot in that room. He was wearing a T-shirt, a shirt over that, and some kind of sweater thing, and he kept saying, "I'm freezing." I'm like, it's warm in here. And then I'm talking to Adam West for a minute, and look over, and Woody's gone. Like, oh, what happened? Where'd he go? Comes back wearing a coat over all the other crap he had.
Yeah.
I said, this is a sick man. That's a very sick man. He had a lot of physical issues.
Yeah, it's known.
That's very sad. Because I keep using the phrase all-time great Grandmaster Hall of Fame. Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, he mentored so many guys.
Oh yeah, he
may have been irascible with them, as they all said the crazy stories. But he took them under the wing as the assistant, and they learned.
Well, back in those non-politically correct days, Woody was famous for saying outrageous stuff. It was like I guess maybe his best friend was Jack Abel, Jewish guy, right?
Yeah.
And so Woody would say things like this. Jack told me this story. He said that one time they were working, and Woody said, you know what an anti-Semite is? Jack says, what? He says, someone who hates Jews more than they should. You could get away with that back in the ancient days.
Yeah.
You'd say that now. I'm probably getting in trouble just for quoting a story. But
Mike's Jewish. We're good.
Yeah, and then it's like there was all kinds of fooling around like that in jokes. And then back in those days, nobody cared. And now they'd sue you. But he's such a good man. He didn't really have any malice. He just he was outrageous.
Just one of those characters.
Yeah, ask Zach. Zach will tell you.
And honestly, I think just about all those guys are. I mean, we hear the stories now. We're still hearing these crazy stories. Oh yeah, one time back in '69.
Yeah, and back then, like I said, it's like it wasn't quite as fussy politically correct as it is now.
You can't get away with anything anymore.
It's like you say one wrong word and you get fired from your news anchor position.
Or your amusement park position. But anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever.
Yeah, it's and everything is corporatized now, and there's no, it's we see it everywhere, and especially in our industry at the shows, it's very different than what it used to be 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Well, I also, when I was at Marvel, I used to give what I called a senior citizen discount, because, guys who grew up in the antediluvian era, sometimes they'd say stuff that, you probably shouldn't say.
Right.
But I give him the senior citizen discount. I say, he doesn't have. What my criterion was malice. Does this man have any malice? If it's malicious, I don't want him. I had this one editor I had to fire, he was racist. He was anti-Semite. He was, it was terrible. I had to fire him, and it's like that's malice. I don't want that. I can't work here. But and Larry Hama would say outrageous stuff, sometimes.
Yeah.
And just to freak people out and things. But it was just, there's not a drop of malice in that man. He's a good man.
You hired Ditko for some work. Did you ever get a chance to meet him and talk to him personally?
Oh yeah, worked for me at all three companies, first three companies.
Okay.
What happened was back in those days, Neil had a big studio, the Continuity Studios. Right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, a lot of times after work, people go there and hang out because that was the clubhouse. That was, everybody went there, you know. And a lot of guys, Neil rented space, rented offices to artists. Like Jack Abel worked there for a while, and he shared a room with Howard Chaykin. And a lot of guys worked there.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is, see, if they worked there, and some really lucrative advertising job came in, they were on the spot, right?
Yeah.
You know, they say, hey, Jack, we need you to ink this panel. Sure. You know, it pays 10 times what the comics pay.
Yeah.
So anyway, you know, so a lot of people go there and kind of hang out. One time, you know, I said, that's Steve Ditko, you know? And so I went over and introduced myself. And, okay, nice to meet you, you know. And I said, Steve, I said, look, I said, if you ever want work, you know, I said, the door's always open. Anytime, you know. And he said, I don't know, I hate Marvel. I don't, you know. I said, okay. I said, I want to tell you, the new sheriff in town, you know, and things have changed. The pay is better. You know, we have royalties. We get, you know, all this good stuff, you know. And no, I don't mind, you know. And so I'd run into him here and there, you know, at Neil's. And, you know, it was always nice to me. He just didn't like Marvel.
Yeah.
Okay. And I kept telling him, I said, you're a founding father, you know. If you need work, if you need anything, then let me know. And so one day, receptionist calls me. She says, this is Steve Ditko guy here. You want to talk to him? I said, yes, I want to talk to Steve Ditko. So I went out to the reception room and I walked him back to my office, and he sat down and we were just talking. I didn't bring up work at all, you know, and he didn't either. We were just talking, you know, about this and that in the old days, and you know, he didn't really know my history, so I didn't tell him. And, you know, anyway, we got along, and then finally he says, "Well, I got to go now." I said, "Well, stop by anytime." And so, like about a week later. Oh, but by the way, then I went out after Steve left. I went out and told the receptionist who he was, and she should treat him like royalty, right?
Yeah.
And I explained, you know, who he was. So anyway, a week later, he shows up, and she says, "Oh, go right in, Mr. Ditko." And then she's on the phone. She's telling all the editors, "Hey, Steve Ditko's in the office. Steve Ditko's in the office." And so, Steve and I are sitting there talking again about nothing, you know. And all of a sudden, all these people come in. Hey, Steve, you know, oh, God, so happy to meet you. And I mean, he's just getting all this adulation and everything. And, you know, he was pleased, you know, with everybody. And then finally he said, well, I got to go. And so he leaves. And they said, is he going to work for us? I said, we didn't even talk about that, you know. Next time he shows up, treated like royalty, and comes into my office. And sits down, and we're talking. And he says, if you have anything interesting, I'd consider it. I think I gave him a Captain America story, you know. And then after that, he worked for us regularly. He became the artist on ROM, for instance. And Steve's fussy. He wants to do characters he doesn't want conflicted characters. He wanted the good guys are good and the bad guys are bad. Black, white, Mr. A.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so that's Rom is perfect. He's a knight, you know.
Yeah.
So he did a great job on that, and of course everybody wanted to ink a Ditko job, and so he had great inkers. There was like they lined up for it. So I got to know him pretty well then, and then after I left, wasn't too long before they let him go. Said, we're not going to work for you, you know. Founding father, you fool. You know. Anyway,
they had him doing Chuck Norris and his Karate Commandos.
Yeah, and then they just didn't have anything for him, you know, and so they kind of cut him loose. It's a founding father, you idiot. Anyway, so he shows up at Valiant, and he needed a gig, you know. I said, well, we're doing wrestling books. faces and heels, you know, good guys, bad guys. So I can do that. Okay. So he did some wrestling books for us, and they were great. I mean, it's terrific. You know, and the wrestling, the WWF people were happy with it, and got a decent anchor on it, and he did good work. Then after I left Valiant, they cut him loose. I mean, he actually, after the wrestling was over, he did Magnus because I convinced him. Magnus is all good, you know, so he did Magnus, and he did some really nice ones. And then after I left, they cut him loose, you know. And I'm thinking, you fools. So he comes and he works for me a little bit at Defiant. But by that time, he was starting to get other offers. He get Mike Richardson at Dark Horse, and I guess he was working with this guy. I can't remember his name. But he had other work, and he was also getting a lot of, I guess, reprint money from Marvel. So he was okay, you know. And so he did one job for him. But then guess what? At Broadway, he turns up, you know. And he didn't really desperately need work at that point. But so we were talking about things we might do together. And I said, you know, what I'd really like to do is Mr. A. Nobody touches Mr. A. I said, Steve, here's the deal. I said, you want it, you want all rights, you want everything. We have one publication, one shot, okay? We have one printing, that's all. And that's yours. I said, you find a lawyer you like. I'll pay for the lawyer. He can make sure that contract is airtight. You know, I said, you know, somebody you like, I'll pay for it. You know, and so we can't do it. Right. Then the next time he comes in, he has a complete issue, penciled and written, of Mr. A. Okay, and he said, I thought you might like to see this. I said, oh, wow, it was really good. Yeah. It was excellent. You know, because he really cared about Mr. A. He was passionate about it. And so we were going to do it. But then we were sold to Golden Books, and Golden Books put us out of business. You know, so it's sad because I would have loved to have published Mr. A. That would have been fun. I wouldn't have cared if we lost money. Who cared?
I think I'm the world's only person who's cosplayed as Mr. A. I had the little cards, the good and evil cards and everything, and I'd like
the black and the white.
I'd do the pose, like the.
Yes. Yeah. But and this story was tremendous. It was great, and then the character, the idea of the character is really, it's spooky and it's weird and crazy and it's great.
It's so weird because it gets a lot of criticism from people, but I think that extremism, the way he portrayed it, is fascinating.
Oh yes, He's again all-time great, Grandmaster, Hall of Fame. You know,
at the end, and
after we all go away, you know, he gets to sit at the adults table.
And he was cranking them out till the end.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He was doing this.
I just want to sit at the kids' table in earshot so I can hear what they say.
No, you get a table at the adult guys who ran the business table.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of you know, that you're part of this. I say it's like the ex-president's club. It's like you ever get like you and Paul and even Roy. You know, there's only so many of you guys that have been.
And Saul Brodsky should have a seat at that table.
Yes, absolutely.
Stan will be over with the creative guys. Yeah.
No, but Saul, you know, people I don't think realize how much Saul really ran that ship.
Yeah, well, Saul Brodsky, Stan, he wanted to do the creative. He didn't, anything that was legal, technical, financial, or complicated, that was Saul, you know. So Saul really was piloting the ship. But Stan was creating great work, you know, and that it's almost like Archie, you know.
Yeah.
Archie, brilliant guy. He just didn't want to do all this, you know.
I'm a staunch defender of Stan Lee. You know, when people want to like maybe balance the scales between what is Stan, I say it's okay if you want to talk about, say, the pairings of him and Ditko and him and Kirby, but don't take away from Stan what Stan did in cultivating the idea that Marvel Comics was this crazy place in New York where the coolest grown-ups in the world all works, and it was the house of ideas and Stan Soapbox, and just they created the mythology of Marvel Comics as a business, as this place that existed beyond the characters. And again, you kind of filled in that role during your tenure. You reestablished Marvel as this, oh wow, when I grow up, I want to work there. You know, even if it was.
When I started, Marvel and DC were each roughly 30% of the market, 32%, something like that. Okay. Now, the direct market started to grow, partially because we started doing better books. Okay. And that helped them grow, and they helped us grow. Right. It was a real good synergy there. Okay. After a couple of years, Marvel was 70% of the market, and DC had fallen to 18%. However, in the rising tide that lifted all the boats, 18% was bigger than their 30% used to be.
Wow.
Yeah. So they were a little peeved, but whatever. But anyway, no, I had to. It was do or die. You know, it was just do or die. And like I said, I was just got lucky with brilliant creative people, editors, and that they just kicked ass. You know, they did so much great stuff.
So if Ditko and Kirby and those guys have their creative table over there, and is mostly over there, he'll come over and visit you guys. But you and Saul and Paul and I hate
to say it, but Mort, but he'll have to sit off to the side.
And Julie belongs there.
Julie, I'd count Julie. Yeah.
And,
a cranky old man, but we got along. Toward the end of his life, I mean, he retired, but they kept him on as a consultant. He worked 1 day a week, Wednesday, okay, and he had a little office, and he would come in, and he was supposed to be available for consultation, right? And he was, except nobody ever consulted with him, nobody. And so he called me up and he said, "You free for lunch?" Because he's lonely, And so I'd go, and we meet at this joint called Martini's across the street from DC. And we'd have lunch, and he was in no hurry because there's nothing for him to do back there. So he spent a good time, and he told me some great old stories about him and Mort and their adventures and everything. I mean, like, he's a cranky old guy, but again, no malice. So I got to know him pretty well toward the end there. We'd have lunch pretty much every Wednesday, and that was nice. One time, he said, "Oh, come on upstairs with me at DC." I said, "They don't want me there. I said, they don't like me, And he said, "You're with me. You can come." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "I don't think it's going to work out too well." So we went upstairs, and he's showing me around, and there was this wall of covers, this month's covers, for all the books. And he says, "All right, he's going to test your skills. What do you think of these covers?" I said, "They're kind of boring." I said, "They're all pinups, He said, "Good boy. I think Mort actually taught you something." I said, "Yeah, they don't have any hooks. There's nothing that compelling about what's on the cover that makes you want to see what's going on inside." And anyway, word spreads that I'm there. And so Denny O'Neil and Mike Carlin throw a fit and complain to Paul Levitz. And so I'm not allowed to go in that section, right? So Julie was pissed off. And so he takes me to his little office, and we're sitting there for a while. But I'll tell you what, okay, Carlin and O'Neil, both of whom I fired from Marvel, they didn't like me. But many people came to Julie's office just to say hello. Really nice. And Julie had a thing on a pad on the wall where it was sort of like Julie's shit list. And so we wanted everybody to sign it. So I just signed my name on his list. Jack Abel, Terry also made one of those for Jack Abel too. But anyways, I saw towards the end of his life, we really became kind of buddies, and that was good.
I think also at the table, Carmine and Dick Giordano.
Yeah, okay, I'll buy that. Yeah, Dick, I don't know. You put him with the artists. Carmine, you could put him with the artists too.
Yeah.
I don't know. Whatever. You're talking all-time great Hall of Fame grandmasters, and that's and then the kids table. There were so many great people back then. So many great people, and we just named a bunch of them.
But I think it was during your time. It was Dick, Carmine, and Paul were the three at DC that were running the show.
I think Carmine was gone by then.
Was he? No, I think he was there just before the implosion, if I remember. Maybe he was gone.
He was doing Flash.
I think so. Saul Harrison was the president.
Okay.
And they brought Jeanette in as the publisher.
Right.
And then Saul got forced out, and Jeanette became president and publisher. Paul started off as Joe Orlando's assistant, and he was so valuable to Joe Orlando that when the cutback came, they refused to pay him anymore. Joe paid him out of his own pocket because he was indispensable.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so he would still keep coming in because Joe was paying. And then before you know it, he's the traffic manager. And it's just like me. Get the trains on time, and it wasn't easy because DC had fallen into disrepair. And then from there he becomes, I don't know what, assistant to Jeanette, and then eventually when she goes, he became president and publisher. So and Paul, was a very smart man. He was a very sharp guy. So and he went to business school. So, and I didn't. I knew what I knew because Mort taught me, and I read a lot. But I wasn't.
Yeah, but you were a smart hustler kid from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I was smart and determined, and didn't know everything, but learned along the way. And and somehow or another we got it done. We like I said, we were 70% of the market. We were going to actually. One day I get this call from Bill Sarnoff. Bill Sarnoff was the head. I don't know if he was president or what they called him, but he ran Warner Publishing, including Warner Publishing Services, Warner Books, and the comics, and other things under his purview. And he called me up, and I said, "Well, what can I do for you?" He said, "We're losing about $10 million a year publishing." I said, "Oh, wow." And he said, "You guys make money publishing?" I said, "Yeah, we make quite a bit." He said, "We make our money licensing." He said, "You guys don't do that much licensing." I said, "Yeah, we're kind of inept at it." And he said, "Here's what I'm proposing." He said, "You become the publisher of DC Comics because you know how to make money with it.
Right.
And then we'll help you with your licensing." And I said, "Well, this is a little over my head." I said, "I'm going to have to talk to the president of the company." I said, "We'll get back to you." He said, "Okay." So we were going to work out some deal where Marvel would license those characters. So instead of losing $10 million a year, they would get an income stream, and then maybe we would be helped out with the licensing, and maybe we would get a percentage of the increase in licensing on the characters if we made them succeed. So I went up and talked to the president, and I told him the whole thing, and he said, I said, it's you got to talk to this guy, and he said, "All right, I'll take care of it." So a little bit later that day, I ran into him and I said, "Did you talk to Sarnoff?" He said, "Yeah, I told him we weren't interested." I said, "What?" He said, "I told him we weren't interested." I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, those characters aren't any good. They don't sell." I said, "No, those are iconic. They're great characters." I said, "It's just that they don't know how to do it, and we do." And I said, "Please tell him, that we're reconsidering, and we, give us a couple of days." He says, all right. He said, I'll do that. He said, put together a business plan for publishing DC Comics. So I figured we'd start out with, I can't remember how many, maybe 8 or something titles.
Yeah.
The obvious one. Superman, Batman.
Yeah.
Legion for me. So I put together this business plan. And and I was real conservative with the numbers. I didn't want to look like I was in fantasy land, but I knew I was being real conservative. And so I go up and I give it to Galton. And so he gives it to Barry Kaplan, the financial guy, and Ed Shogun, the circulation guy, right? And then we have a meeting. And there's me and Ed and Barry Kaplan and Galton. And so Galton says to Ed Shogun, the circulation guy, he says, well, what do you think of this business plan? He says, it's ridiculous. And see, Galton looks at me like, see? He says, we'll do triple this. And so Galton said, what? Like that would have been like $7 million in the first year, and I said, that's true, because Marvel #1 Superman, and any Marvel #1 at that point would sell 300,000 to 500,000 copies, direct market only.
And that was the source of the famous John Byrne kind of mock-up of.
Yeah, John was determined that he was. If we had, I don't even know how he found out. Right. Somehow he found out. Yeah. So he was determined that he's going to do Superman. Yeah. He wrote a plot, and he drew a cover. And the plot was not good anyway. So I wasn't going to get into an argument about something that was speculative.
Right.
But we started working on the deal. And it was coming along. And something to work out details with the licensing and stuff, and we would publish the 8 top titles to start with, and all we need is 1 editor and 2 assistants and 1 production person. Okay, and so the costs were minimal because we already had everything. We had the machinery in place. So we're going to do this, and then First Comics sued us for antitrust. Okay.
Oh my!
And so when you're already 70% of the market, okay, which is one of the thresholds for antitrust, and that is not a good time to devour your largest competitor.
I like the diamond.
Yeah. So anyway, the deal fell apart because while we're being sued, we can't do it. And by the time that suit was over, it was too late.
Yeah, whenever I hear that story, I can't help but thinking at the time, boy, who would you put on those titles? And I'm not asking you to speculate.
They would have been lined up at the door. I could have had my pick.
Yeah, you would have had everybody. And I think of the fan scene at that time. I think of the Comic Buyer's Guide stopping the press, putting out a special edition, and I think of Gary Groth jumping out a window.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Gary Groth, it's his apocalypse. He's done. He checks out.
Oh, by the way, guys, we were talking before about Stan stories, and when at ChicagoCon one year they had a Stan Lee roast, okay, and I gave a speech, and I tried to be funny, but I couldn't be mean to Stan. I couldn't do it, and so made fun of myself. And stuff. Now I kept them. I have like 53 index cards with notes on them, which is my speech, right? And so when Roy Thomas asked me to write a tribute to Stan for his tribute to Stan Lee issue of Alter Ego, which you could probably still find, I quoted the roast speech, and you should read it. It's a unique insight into Stan, I think, that most people don't have. But I know how that came up is that he was talking about, people taking credit away from Stan. Nobody needs to pad Kirby's resume. Nobody needs to pad Ditko's resume, and nobody needs to take anything away from Stan.
Well, I think that, in my opinion, which matters to nobody anywhere, I always look at it that, Stan is there's Stan Lee, the character, the showman, the P.T. Barnum of the comic industry. Stan is P.T. Barnum of comic books and created the biggest multimedia sensation basically off of his voice.
Yes.
Stan and Jack never did anything as great on their own as they did together. Stan and Ditko.
Well, yeah, I would say Stan with Ditko was
again
stuff ever done.
Right, it's Stan and Ditko is amazing.
Yes.
Stan never did anything great without Ditko or Kirby or Romita Sr. Like him and those guys, that time was his time. And Kirby, as great as Kirby was, and Kirby was amazing, his stuff with Stan is the best stuff he's ever done.
Yeah, well, also, don't forget, Stan, from the beginning, from Fantastic Four #1 until like Marvel, sometime after Marvel was sold, which was 68, I think. And then, everything was stayed in place, for a while. But Stan was writing 12 books a month.
Yeah.
I wrote 6 books one month. It almost killed me. And, I asked him. I said, how did you do it? And he said, I took the 6 books one month and it almost killed me. He said, you put more into it than I do. What a lie. What a facile lie. But it was a nice thing to say, And but I mean, you think about that. So he reached a point, I think, where he kind of burned out, And those were the glory years with Ditko and Kirby, and then there was John Romita, and I think Jack was still there to the end of it.
But Jack goes to DC and creates the New Gods, creates the Demon, creates amazing stuff. Not as kinetic, not as
there was just chock full of ideas and brilliant stuff and great concepts and great characters and not great dialogue.
Right.
He needed a collaborator.
Like I said, it's like when they had Stan, doing the writing and also contributing a lot of people think, oh, Kirby did everything and then Stan just wrote the dialogue. No, I'm sorry. I worked with both of them.
He edited the books.
Yes, and I knew them well.
And editing back then, it's the way Stan did it, way more hands-on.
Oh, yes, and one of the proof of that is that when I came up to Marvel the first time when I was 17 years old, I walked into Saul Brodsky's office, and he had a stack of pages like as far as your fingers can stretch, and my fingers stretched quite a bit. A stack of rejected pages, and most of them were Kirby, because Kirby did more work than anybody.
Oh my!
And I wanted to talk to Saul about trying out as an inker. I thought I could do it because I used to. I went to art school. So he said, "Oh, here's a Kirby page, and here's a Gene Colan page. He says, practice on those. Let's see what they look like." Okay, I mean, because in those days nobody thought the art was valuable. They gave it away to kids.
Yeah.
On tours, and so okay, So I badly inked the rejected splash page of whichever issue was the Agatha Harkness issue, like in maybe 94 or something.
Oh, wow.
There's a rejected page. And but like I said, there's a whole stack of rejected pages because Jack would draw something and he'd call Kirby and say, no, do this over. He was very hands-on. And John Romita tells the story when Stan and Jack and John, they all lived on Long Island, okay? And John would drive, okay? So he'd be driving, and Stan and Jack would be plotting a story while they're driving, And he said, no, it wasn't just Jack. It was, it was Stan, and Stan was in charge, So he was the one who got to say. And so John tells that story, and I can just picture it, because like I knew both of them pretty well. Anyway, So I mean, the myth that Stan was just the factotum. No, that's not true. Stan, I worked with all of them, and I know that Stan was the man.
I think that pretty much says it. Patty, is there anything else you want to ask Jim tonight before we wrap this up?
Yeah, there's a, what, I got there's so much more stuff. We should have gone more in. Jim, please come back and join us again when you're feeling. I would love to go a little more into detail on the Valiant stuff. I would love to hear I'd love to hear Defiant and those times. I'd love to hear about the arena show you were
Spider-Man and the Night of Doom.
Yeah, there's so much more stuff too, and
those Broadway books. I'd love to talk about Broadway. Those were beautiful comics.
Some of them, yeah. I mean, some were. We had some that weren't didn't please me, but the packaging. A lot of them were pretty good, and we had this newfangled guy, J.G. Jones, and he turned out to be pretty good.
Again,
and then Jeff Isherwood, and we had some good guys. Anyway, anytime, guys. Anytime.
Yeah, I gotta hear the inside story of the generic superhero book.
There is a story there, I'll tell you.
There is, okay. It's a deal. That Dazzler, the graphic novel. Oh God, this so much. Yeah, let's do this again in a few weeks, and wish you a great recovery. Like I said, I'm glad to see you.
Yeah, next time I'll actually shave.
Me too.
All right. Well, I hope this was okay.
Oh, this was great, and as always, we say this to all those guests. We look forward to the Society as being released.
And I do have a question before we go. Do you have anything you're working on right now?
Oh yeah.
Yes, I'm actually writing a screen treatment. They're actually paying me. Wow.
Nice.
Usually that stuff is done on spec, but I was hired to do this, and it's for a producer, director, and one-time actor. Victor Kubicek, and he's the guy who owns the Terminator franchise.
Oh,
yeah, and remember that what is it? What's the name? Sarah Connor? Is that the woman? Sarah Connor. There was a TV show, Sarah Connor.
Yeah,
he did that. And I guess he's done some Terminator stuff besides that. But that's what he does. I'm not working on Terminator. This is a whole new project. But I'm working on a screen treatment for that, and that's what I should have been doing right now. But this is more fun.
Absolutely. Good.
Anyway, that's keeping me busy, and I got a couple other projects lined up behind that. Waiting for me to get around to them. So I'm keeping busy.
Good.
Well, we look really forward to seeing you again here in this electronic format, and more importantly, when the world hopefully gets a little bit back more normal, we'd love to have you back at our shows. We want to have you on our stages in front of your fans.
I'm happy to do it anytime you need me.
So Jim, stick around for a minute. We're gonna wrap it up, and then we'll meet up backstage. I want to show you something funny when we're off here.
Okay.
All right.
And to everybody watching, thank you for joining us. This was a marathon session, but boy, we learned a heck of a lot of history, learned some technical stuff about this industry, and we learned a lot about the wisdom here of Jim Shooter. Jim, thank you for everything that you've done, and this has been a pleasure.
Thanks, guys. It's been fun.
All right, stick around. We'll
I'm here.
If you're still around, get us out of here.